In the eastern reaches of the Ruhona Kingdom lies Manatuka, a peaceful country town nestled among rolling hills and quaint stone buildings. Outside one of these homes, a burly man expresses his deep gratitude to a young boy named Kinato, marveling at the incredible magic that has left him feeling better than ever. The young practitioner, known locally as a town Setai, modestly dismisses the praise, explaining that he simply used his magic to close a wound and accelerate the natural healing process. As they talk, the man notes how different Kinato's gift is from those who cast flashy fireballs, though the boy insists his work is merely the humble adjustment of mana for therapeutic treatment. Having finished his round for the day, the boy is suddenly interrupted by a boisterous shout from Liney, the innkeeper's daughter, who comes charging toward him. She immediately leans in with a shimmering, pleading gaze, shamelessly asking her childhood friend for a loan while leaning on their long history together. When he protests his lack of funds, she responds with a playful but painfully tight headlock, ignoring his cries that she might actually crack his skull open. Releasing him with a sheepish apology, she admits she was testing a theory from a book about physical touch, before turning serious and handing him a heavy satchel she had been carrying. She explains the predicament, her voice tinged with worry for a guest at the inn who is deeply fond of a now-wilting plant. Having hoped to replace it, but finding herself short on funds from unpaid part-time work, she looks to her friend for help. Kinato listens intently, his expression shifting from curiosity to a quiet resolve. He takes the small pot into his hands, observing that even simple flora possesses a flow of mana, however jumbled and faint it might be. While she watches with bated breath, he considers whether his unique skills can restore order to the plant's internal energy. With a sudden burst of focus, the young healer initiates his Setai magic, calling out for acceleration as he begins the delicate process. He carefully draws out the withered remnants and infuses the soil with the perfect amount of water, his hands glowing with the effort of the magical adjustment. Because of his intervention, the plant springs back to life, its leaves vibrant and full once more. Overjoyed by the transformation, she playfully wonders if he could apply such magic to her own physique, though he quickly clarifies that his techniques are for treatment and would be far too taxing for a healthy person to endure. Their light-hearted moment is interrupted by the sound of slow clapping as three strangers emerge from the shadows of the street. These newcomers, identified by the girl as the same travelers who have been inquiring about a mage at the inn, approach with an air of seasoned confidence, having witnessed the display of magic. These are adventurers, individuals who belong to guilds and traverse the world on perilous missions, from clearing labyrinths to guarding entire kingdoms. They are widely recognized as the undisputed experts of combat, their lives defined by the quests they undertake. Following the lead provided by the innkeeper's daughter, the trio makes their way to a more private setting to discuss their business. The quiet exterior of the building belies the significant encounter taking place within its walls. Inside, they sit across from the young practitioner, reiterating the rumors they've heard regarding his formidable magical prowess. Despite their praise, he remains humble, waving off the title of a powerful mage as the girl looks on with a cheerful smile. He is visibly unsettled as the adventurer leans in, snapping his fingers and praising the boy's supposed power to control nature itself. The man insists that such magic is a rare gift, but the young practitioner can only offer a nervous, sweating glance in return. He quickly tries to correct the misunderstanding, explaining that his craft is actually Setai magic, a therapeutic art used to treat physical ailments. He gestures toward the table, emphasizing the medicinal nature of his work rather than the grand elemental control the stranger imagines. The leader echoes the term with a skeptical tilt of his head, prompting the boy to clarify further. He explains that his technique simply focuses on the body's natural processes, using mana to accelerate the speed of physical regeneration. Nearby, Liney can't help but giggle at the awkward exchange, while the burly laborer from earlier enthusiastically demonstrates his restored mobility to the other adventurers. The man's shoulder is completely healed, serving as undeniable proof of the boy's effective, if humble, talents. The atmosphere shifts as the leader reveals his true intent, speaking of a formidable dragon lurking within the southwestern forest. He formally requests that the young healer join their party, believing his unique skills are exactly what they need for such a perilous hunt. This revelation leaves the boy wide-eyed and breathless, the word dragon echoing in his mind with a sense of pure disbelief. The sheer scale of the request is far beyond anything he had ever anticipated. The adventurer continues his pitch, pointing out that maintaining the party's physical condition is the key to surviving an encounter with such a beast. He is convinced that the Setai magic, despite its therapeutic roots, will be the deciding factor in their success. Overwhelmed by the sudden proposal, the boy asks for time to consider the offer, while Liney's eyes light up at the mention of a referral fee. The leader assures them of a generous reward, leaving the young healer to weigh the risks of a journey he never saw. He admits his limitations, his face beaded with sweat as he considers the weight of the request. The adventurer leader accepts this for now, turning to depart while the young healer and his friend watch him go. Before leaving, the man warns that a rampaging dragon would eventually threaten the town itself. He leaves Kanado with a choice, stating they will wait at the front gates until tonight for his final answer. As the weight of the decision settles, memories of childhood resurface, reminding him of a time when he and his friend dreamed of using magic to help others. Back then, he had openly wished to become an adventurer, a goal they had shared since they were small. She looks at him with a soft but firm expression, remarking that it would be a tragedy to let such a dream remain nothing more than a fleeting thought. The quiet exterior of the Setai clinic stands bathed in the light of the waning day, a place of peace that now feels caught in the shadow of the coming storm. Inside, an elderly woman enjoys a quiet moment with a drink until the door creaks open. He returns home, his voice heavy with the day's burdens as he announces his arrival. While he prepares for the evening, his mind remains fixed on the adventurer's warning about the dragon's threat to the town. He stares down at his medical texts, paralyzed by the uncertainty of whether he should risk everything to join the hunt. Sensing his inner turmoil, the old woman offers her unwavering support, telling him that he has become a magnificent practitioner. She assures him that she would be proud to see him take his skills wherever they're needed most. She watches him go with a warm smile, offering a final word of encouragement to do a good job. He thanks her, clutching his medical treatise tightly to his chest as he steps through the town gates into the twilight. Waiting by the stone archway, the cloaked leader spots the approaching figure and notes his arrival. He skids to a halt before the group, doubled over and gasping for breath as he stammered out an apology for his tardiness. Once he catches his breath, the boy looks up with determination, pleading with them to let him join the hunt. He explains that if there's even a small chance his medical skills could be of use, he wants to prove his worth. He admits that while the task might be beyond his current abilities, he is driven by a need to discover the limits of his potential. Behind him, the adventurers exchange knowing, predatory grins. As they begin to move, he tentatively asks if they have a specific strategy for the dragon. The leader snaps his fingers with a smirk, confirming that a plan is indeed in place. Without warning, the man lunges forward, his large hand clamping firmly over the boy's mouth to stifle any outcry. He reveals with a chilling calmness that the strategy was simply to lure the boy to this specific, secluded spot. Struggling against the iron grip, the boy is pinned as the leader scoffs at the nature of his magic. The man expresses his disdain, calling the Setai arts useless for their true purposes. He leans in close, his voice dripping with a cruel honesty as he shatters the boy's illusions. He explains that they aren't actually adventurers and the dragon was a mere fabrication, but Kanado's ability to use magic makes him a valuable prize nonetheless. With a mocking laugh, the man shoves the bound boy into a cold, iron-barred cell carved into the mountainside. The heavy gate creaks shut with a final, metallic clang, leaving the captive alone in the shadows of the encampment. Suddenly, the silence of the prison is broken by a sharp metallic snap as the boy's restraints are severed. He hits the ground with a grunt, looking up in confusion as a mysterious figure moves with blinding speed through the darkness. As he struggles to sit up, he finds himself staring at a strange young man who has seemingly ignored the gravity of the situation. Instead of a daring rescue, the newcomer's crouched nearby, rhythmically chewing on something he found on the ground. The stranger notices the boy's bewildered expression and immediately becomes defensive, his mouth still full of greenery. He frantically insists that it isn't what it looks like, claiming with wide-eyed earnestness that the grass in this particular area is actually quite edible. Flashing a confident, roguish grin, the man winks and suggests that the boy should start showing some respect by calling him Big Bro. The captive, however, is far from impressed, flatly refusing the absurd request while still trying to process the bizarre turn of events. He then shifts to a more serious tone, pointing out a distinct, ornate badge pinned to his sleeve as a mark of his true profession. He explains that real adventurers always carry such identification, leading the boy to the painful realization that he had been completely swindled by a group of amateurs. Standing tall with an air of undeniable authority, the man finally introduces himself properly. He reveals that he is Jian, the captain of a legitimate adventurers guild known as the Iron Fangs, and he is the real deal. He sits bound by thick ropes, yet wears a casual, almost smug grin as he introduces himself as a captain of an adventurers guild. The revelation leaves the young boy across from him reeling in disbelief, struggling to reconcile the man's prestigious title with his current predicament. If he truly is the real deal, the boy wonders how such a powerful figure ended up captured and tied like a common prisoner. In response to the boy's skepticism, the captain begins to recount the events that led him here, explaining that he had been tracking a group of smugglers known as the Black Market. He describes a brutal confrontation where he was systematically breaking the bones of his enemies until one managed to slip away, forcing him into a pursuit. As he chased the fugitive through the streets, his focus was suddenly shattered by the sight of a girl offering free food samples. Admitting to a moment of weakness, he confesses that he simply couldn't resist the temptation and stopped his pursuit just to have a taste, much to the boy's utter bewilderment. The snack turned out to be a trap, heavily laced with sleep medicine that sent him crashing to the ground in an instant. He laughs heartily at his own misfortune, finding the situation hilarious even as he struggles against the magical ropes that now bind him, noting with a grunt that the enchanted restraints are proving to be quite a nuisance. The captain sits bound by magical ropes, noting that struggling only makes them tighter while they actively siphon his mana. Observing the captain's struggle, the young boy realizes he might have a solution. He suggests using the isekai techniques his grandmother taught him to facilitate their escape, much to the other man's confusion. His explanation leaves the captain staring blankly, unable to comprehend the term isekai. Ignoring the man's confusion, the young practitioner explains his theory. The magical binding is in a state of extreme tension, much like a contracted muscle. He reasons that by treating the device's mana flow as a physical ailment, he can force it to loosen. With a look of intense focus, he prepares to channel his unique magic directly into the bindings to manually adjust the flow of energy. He executes the technique, calling for the magic to relax. A sudden burst of light erupts from his hands as the energy interacts with the ropes. His efforts are rewarded immediately as the bindings fall away, completely neutralized. He cheers in triumph while his companion looks on, genuinely impressed. Watching the boy celebrate, the captain stretches his stiff limbs and notes the presence of guards outside. He tells his young savior to leave the enemies to him, expressing his gratitude for the rescue as they prepare to make their move back to town. He remains the subject of their mockery as the guards outside laugh amongst themselves, oblivious to the change within the cell. One of them scoffs at the very idea of an escape, boasting that the ropes are reinforced with complex magical layers woven by multiple mages, making any attempt at struggle utterly futile. The prisoner shatters that confidence in a heartbeat, erupting through the stone floor in a violent explosion of dust and jagged debris. The sheer force of his breakout sends shockwaves through the structure, turning the solid rock into a hail of projectiles. Emerging from the settling wreckage, the captain wears a sharp, dangerous smirk. His eyes gleam with a predatory intensity, signaling that the roles of predator and prey have been decisively reversed. The sudden breakout throws the entire camp into a state of frantic disarray. Guards scramble in panic, their voices rising in a chorus of alarm as they realize their valuable merchandise is slipping away. Amidst the chaos, he moves with lethal efficiency, striking down anyone who dares to block his path to freedom. The warrior strides calmly through the destruction, adjusting his collar while noting that although his mana hasn't fully returned, this level of power is more than sufficient for the current task. Nearby, the young boy watches the display in absolute awe, his eyes wide as he witnesses the true strength of a high-ranking adventurer. With a confident glint in his eye, he asks where the rest of the opposition is hiding. He is eager to show these amateurs the vast difference between a common thug and the way a captain of a real adventurers guild conducts a fight. Elsewhere in the camp, the leader of the captors stares at his maps in disbelief, sweat beading on his forehead as reports of the escape reach him. He cannot comprehend how a man whose mana should have been completely drained could possibly possess the raw strength to tear through magical restraints and stone walls alike. The young healer can hardly contain his excitement, gushing over the captain's incredible prowess and admitting that his opinion of the man has changed completely. The warrior basks in the admiration with a smug grin, though a sudden, heavy crash nearby suggests his explosive entrance might have caused a bit more structural damage than he intended. He had barely tasted freedom when the sky itself seemed to shatter, a massive dragon descending through the moonlight amidst a rain of pulverized rock. The beast's golden eye fixed upon the two small figures, its breath hissing like steam between rows of razor-sharp teeth. Looking up at the titan perched atop the ruins, the scale of their predicament became terrifyingly clear. A primal scream of pure, unadulterated terror tore from their throats as the reality of the monster's presence fully registered. It answered with a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of the earth, its wings beating back the dust in a violent display of power. Nearby, the cloaked leader of the captors scrambled away in a blind panic, his mind reeling at the impossible appearance of a true dragon in their midst. As the creature lunged, Jian grabbed Kinato and dove for cover, the realization dawning on him that the secret base had been foolishly constructed right on the doorstep of a dragon's lair. Crouched behind a jagged outcrop and catching his breath, he acknowledged the grim reality. With no way to call for reinforcements, the burden of slaying the beast fell solely on his shoulders. He turns to leave, his back to the boy, radiating a calm confidence despite the dire situation. Kinato calls out in confusion, questioning how he can fight when his mana reserves are nearly depleted. The swordsman simply waves off the concern, asserting that his martial arts skills will be more than enough to handle what's coming. As he tests his limbs, he is startled by a sudden surge of fluidity in his movements. Minato explains that he managed to redistribute the sliver of mana remaining and realign the warrior's joints, granting him his full range of motion once more. The sensation is immediate, leaving the captain wide-eyed at the unexpected restoration of his physical prowess. He begins a rapid series of strikes and kicks, marveling at how light his body feels. With a grin, he apologizes for not being able to do more, but acknowledges the true nature of the boy's power. To him, this magic isn't just a tool. It's a reflection of a kind soul who truly cares for others, a realization that leaves the young practitioner momentarily speechless. He gives a final, firm instruction for the boy to flee to safety, his voice carrying the weight of a solemn vow. While the danger is immense, he promises to protect both the child and the town, urging him to run while there is still time. Minato stands frozen for a moment, watching the man's retreating figure as he heads toward the heart of the storm. The boy stands alone amidst the rocky terrain, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the weight of the situation settles on him. He stares toward the direction of the conflict, the silence of the immediate area contrasting sharply with the distant sounds of an impending clash. Farther down the slope, the captain has already engaged the beast, his small form a blur of motion against the massive, scaled terror. The dragon lashes out, its sheer power shattering the surrounding rock into a hail of debris as the two forces collide in a desperate struggle for survival. He begins to scramble up the jagged cliffside, his fingers digging into the cold stone as he reflects on the warrior's words. Realizing that the man's kind magic was actually a selfless attempt to save him, the boy's resolve hardens. He cannot simply watch from the sidelines while someone else risks everything for his sake. Below, the dragon's maw begins to glow with a terrifying, destructive energy. Reaching the crest of the ridge, he looks down upon the battlefield, the true scale of the threat finally laid bare. The dragon looms like a mountain of scales and fury, dwarfing the lone swordsman who stands defiantly against it, and the boy knows that the next few moments will decide the fate of them all. He grips the massage ball tightly, feeling the immense mana vibrating within it. This tool, usually meant for healing, is now a weapon, channeling his isekai magic to boost the flow of energy to an extreme degree. As he prepares to act, the words of his mentor echo in his mind, reminding him that true mastery lies in adjusting mana and controlling the flow of all types of energy into motion. With a desperate cry, he hurls the glowing sphere toward the massive beast, which is already gathering fire in its maw for a lethal strike. Because of the sheer force behind the throw, he activates a technique of super acceleration, the ball becoming a blur of light as it streaks across the battlefield. The impact is instantaneous and violent, the sphere striking the dragon's neck and erupting in a surge of energy that forces the creature's head back with a pained roar. Watching from the sidelines, the swordsman stands frozen in disbelief as the seemingly unstoppable monster is staggered by the boy's unexpected intervention. While the warrior marvels at the sheer power of the isekai technique, the young healer is struck by a sudden, terrifying realization about what he has just done. He collapses to his knees, his heart hammering against his ribs as he gasps for air, knowing with absolute certainty that such a violent application of his craft must never be used on a human patient. He stands there, slightly dazed, as the captain of the Iron Fangs approaches with an exuberant grin. Jian is genuinely impressed, calling the display amazing before asking for the boy's name. Minato introduces himself modestly, still processing the intensity of the battle. Surprised by the revelation, Jian questions if he is truly just an ordinary isekai practitioner. Minato confirms it with a simple nod, explaining that his experience is limited to working at the local clinic in town alongside his grandmother. The captain turns his back for a moment, looking out over the landscape before posing a life-changing question. He asks Minato what he thinks about leaving his quiet life behind to become an adventurer and join the ranks of his guild. Stunned by the sudden proposal, the young practitioner can hardly believe his ears. Jian, however, is full of energy, demonstrating his newfound flexibility by kicking his leg high into the air, attributing his physical peak to Kanato's magic and pressuring him for a response. He looks down, his voice wavering as he tries to decline the offer. He insists that he knows his own limits, and that a simple healer like himself has no place in the dangerous world of professional adventurers. The captain counters immediately, reminding him that he just single-handedly took down a dragon. This logic begins to chip away at Kanato's resolve. He starts to wonder if he could truly be of help to others, though the thought of leaving his grandmother's clinic still weighs heavily on his mind. In his mind, he sees his grandmother offering a warm smile and a sign of encouragement. She tells him that he has grown into a man and should go out and test his strength in the world, urging him to be careful but to embrace the journey. With her blessing echoing in his heart, a new light of determination fills his eyes. He realizes that the circumstances of how he got here no longer matter. What matters is the choice he is about to make to step into the unknown. He stands ready to depart, his satchel packed for the journey ahead. Beside him, Liney waves her arms with infectious energy, shouting her farewells to the townspeople. She calls out for everyone to take care, her voice ringing with a mix of excitement and the bittersweet sting of parting. As they begin their trek away from the familiar sights of home, the captain turns his gaze toward the young practitioner. He offers a firm promise, assuring the boy that he will never regret this decision and expressing a deep-seated confidence in his potential as an adventurer. Touched by this unwavering belief, the youth vows to give his absolute best, his eyes fixed on the horizon of his new life. The group makes their way toward the royal capital. Jian, the eccentric captain of the Iron Fangs, leads the way for Kinato, who has decided to transition from a simple practitioner to an adventurer. Liney follows closely, diligently recording their journey in what she hopes will be a profitable autobiography. He stops to remind the boy of a harsh reality. Despite his skills, he is not yet an adventurer in the eyes of the law because he lacks official certification. This certification is represented by a badge, which the captain proudly displays on his sleeve, explaining that only those bearing such a mark are permitted to take on official work. While Liney scribbles down rather personal observations about his growth and habits, the young practitioner asks for the next step, prompting the captain to reiterate the need for formal registration. They soon arrive at the eastern branch of the Adventurers Association, a peculiar structure shaped like a massive mushroom, where they are greeted by a staff member named Hibiki. She assures them that the process is quite standard, requiring no grueling physical test, but merely some paperwork and a single drop of blood to bind the contract. Once the blood is offered, a round, drum-wielding magic assessment doll is summoned to evaluate his latent abilities and assign a starting rank, which is typically bronze for newcomers. It stares intensely at him before delivering a blunt, insulting verdict that leaves him reeling, even as he silently vows to make his mentor proud. He stands frozen as the assessment doll delivers its scathing verdict, its voice dripping with disdain. It declares that his physical strength and mana capacity are pitifully below the standard base level, concluding that the world has no room for maggots like him. He remains silent as the guild staff member looks on in confusion, questioning the doll's strange and aggressive behavior. Undeterred by the insult, the small creature challenges the boy, stating that if he truly seeks authorization, he must prove his worth through a trial that is about to begin. In response, he shouts his acceptance with fiery determination, his eyes wide with a newfound resolve to overcome the doll's low expectations. As he explains his reasoning, he admits that being put through the ringer feels more comfortable than having things handed to him easily. Behind him, his companions watch with a mix of skepticism and concern, privately wondering if his preference for hardship borders on masochism. Moments later, he listens as the staff member explains that since the blood sample is already registered, the only path forward is to complete the doll's task. The creature sets a harsh deadline. By sundown, he must use his magic to help more than 10 people, or the assessment ends in failure. The trial begins immediately, but he finds it far from simple as the doll relentlessly pummels him while demanding to know what sparked his dream in the first place. He could do little but apologize and endure the physical barrage as they rush through the streets to find those in need. Amidst the chaos, his mind drifts back to the origins of his ambition and the town where he and his childhood friend grew up. He remembers a time when powerful adventurers from a distant guild arrived to defeat monsters and provide aid to the struggling townsfolk. To his younger self, these figures, who shared soup and protection, seemed to belong to a completely different, more heroic world than his own. He recalls a memory of a kind adventurer who used magic not for battle, but to warm the soup of everyone around him. He reflects on how this memory fueled his desire to use magic to help others, even though he didn't fully understand the craft back then. With that conviction burning in his chest, he declares his absolute commitment to the task at hand. His determination is met with mockery from the small, horned creature, which challenges him to melt its cold judgment with his actions. Ignoring the creature's taunts, he arrives in Yuba Town and immediately scans the crowd, spotting a man slumped over and drenched in sweat. Approaching the suffering stranger, he listens as the man groans about a long carriage ride that left him gripped by severe nausea. Watching the man's distress, he moves behind him and applies practiced pressure to specific points on the neck. Relieved by the sudden change, the man stands up and marvels at how much better he feels compared to his usual medicine. Having witnessed the traveler's recovery, Liney proudly explains the nature of sea-time magic to a skeptical Hibiki, describing it as a method to adjust the minute flow of mana within a person's body to treat various ailments from joint aches to nerve pain. She watches as he, a new patient, rejoices when his chronic back pain vanishes under the boy's touch, while the assessment doll observes, noting that the boy's total mana is remarkably low compared to a seasoned captain like Jian. This realization strikes the doll with full force. The boy isn't using his own energy to overpower others, but is instead delicately manipulating the mana already present within his patients. He, the patient, beams with newfound vitality, feeling a comforting warmth spread through his limbs as the treatment takes hold, a feat that should be impossible without incredibly precise control. Despite the success, the town square falls quiet, leaving the exhausted healer slumped on the cobblestones as he searches in vain for anyone else in need of aid. While he rests, Jian casually enjoys a strange snack of garlic chai vanilla, seemingly unbothered by the tension, while Hibiki warns the boy that he needs to help just one more person to satisfy the doll's strict requirements. Hibiki, looks on as the doll itself offers no comfort, bluntly stating that the boy's methods are dangerously unstable and that its duty is to fail those it deems unfit for the rigors of being an adventurer. It watches as he sits in silence, reflecting on the harsh assessment while acknowledging his own limitations. Yet a quiet resolve remains as he refuses to give up on his path just because of his inexperience. He stood his ground, his voice steady as he declared his refusal to abandon his dream of becoming an adventurer just because of a difficult trial. The small, horned creature floating before him seemed to reconsider, noting that the boy's mental fortitude far exceeded its initial expectations. Nearby, others began to notice an unnatural rise in temperature, a heat that felt far too intense for a simple summer day. The source of the heat became terrifyingly clear as a nearby building erupted in a violent pillar of flame and smoke. Panic instantly gripped the street, with onlookers screaming in terror as the structure was consumed by the inferno. Amidst the chaos, the captain of the Iron Fangs turned to the young practitioner with a knowing smirk, entrusting the crisis entirely to his hands. Despite the protests of his companion, who urged them to flee the danger, the captain remained unmoved, confident in the boy's hidden potential. Recalling the teachings of his mentor, the young practitioner remembered that mana was not exclusive to living beings, but flowed through the very veins of the earth itself. He realized that if he could locate a nearby source of groundwater, he might be able to find a way to intervene. With a sharp, focused gaze, he scanned the cobblestone street until he identified the precise trigger point where the groundwater's mana was most concentrated. The assessment doll watched closely, its smug expression replaced by genuine curiosity as the boy prepared his next move. He lunged forward, hurling his mana-imbued massage ball directly at the identified spot with incredible force. The small object hummed with energy, acting as a catalyst to disrupt the natural flow beneath the surface. Following the projectile, he channeled his energy into a burst of super acceleration, slamming his fist into the ground with a thunderous impact. The force of the blow shattered the pavement, creating a massive crater as he sought to redirect the subterranean pressure. A massive geyser of water suddenly erupted from the earth, soaring high into the air and drenching the burning building in a powerful torrent. The crowd watched in awe as the young man successfully transferred the pressure of the earth to combat the raging flames. He has successfully summoned a massive pillar of water, and a young child joyfully rides the crest of the geyser, shouting with glee as the torrent surges upward. Seeing the spectacle, his companions stand in stunned silence. Jian, Hibiki, and Liney watch with wide eyes as the water cascades around them, while a nearby townsman gapes in utter disbelief at the sudden deluge. Across the town square, the towering column of water does its work, completely dousing the flames that threaten the buildings, leaving the onlookers to murmur in awe at the sheer scale of the feat. Once the chaos subsides, the young practitioner collapses onto the ground, gasping for breath while the small assessment doll perches on his shoulder. Nearby, Jian eagerly asks the creature for its final verdict on the boy's performance. In response, the doll produces a heavy, ornate badge and stamps it with a resounding thud, officially declaring that the candidate has cleared all the necessary conditions. Stepping forward with a warm smile, the association staff member presents him with his completed registration documents, confirming that he has finally achieved his goal of becoming an official adventurer. He clutches the badge to his chest, his face lighting up with pure, unadulterated joy as his friends erupt into cheers behind him, celebrating his hard-won victory. Looking down at the silver emblem in his hands, he feels a surge of pride, though he quickly begins to wonder about the specific meaning of its color and what rank he has been assigned in this new life. He stands in stunned silence as the staff member delivers the final verdict of the assessment. Looking down at the records, she explains that his rank is officially designated as colorless, a result she has never encountered before. The captain of the Iron Fangs reacts with pure disbelief, shouting that he is the first person in history to ever receive a rank lower than bronze. Despite the unprecedented ranking, the captain offers a warm smile of encouragement, assuring the young boy that he is rooting for him. With newfound resolve, the youth promises to do his best, his eyes shining with determination. Having successfully completed their initial objective in the town, the group prepares for the long journey ahead to the capital, the bustling home of the Iron Fangs Adventurers Guild. Kinato and Liney stand together, their faces filled with anticipation as they embark on a new phase of their journey. Behind them, the enigmatic Jian looms, his presence a constant reminder of the guild they are about to join. They finally arrive at the grand city of Assam, where the towering stone buildings and bustling crowds leave the young boy wide-eyed with wonder. He can't help but let out a gasp of amazement at the sheer scale of the urban landscape. This is the heart of the Rohuna Kingdom, a sprawling capital where history and modernity blend seamlessly amidst the constant hum of activity. The grand architecture speaks of a long-standing prosperity that stretches as far as the eye can see. As they walk through the streets, he points out the marvels of the capital, explaining that magic is an inseparable part of daily life here. He notes the abundance of magicians and the wide availability of magical devices, his voice filled with awe as he watches someone soar through the sky on an enchanted object, a sight that seems perfectly normal to the city's inhabitants. He turns to his companion, his eyes sparkling with excitement as he asks if she finds the big city as incredible as he does. She, however, is momentarily distracted by the allure of a local lottery booth, eagerly requesting 10 tickets in hopes of a quick fortune. Her excitement quickly turns to comical despair as she realizes she hasn't won a single prize, leaving her slumped in defeat while her friend observes that nothing seems to dampen her spirits for long. After the brief detour, the trio reaches their destination, a sturdy building adorned with a distinctive wolf head emblem. Jian proudly announces that they have finally arrived at his guild, the place that will serve as their new home and base of operations. Stepping inside, they are greeted by the imposing interior of the guild hall, which momentarily silences the young boy with its scale. His companion, however, quickly recovers her spirits, declaring with renewed vigor that she is ready to work hard and earn a fortune, her previous loss at the lottery already a distant memory as she prepares to dive into their new life. She stands with the others as a loud crash echoes through the street, the guild sign having just fallen to the ground. In response to her confusion, Jian laughs it off, explaining that the fallen board was merely a decoy sign. When she demands to know why such a thing would exist, he simply offers a cryptic lesson. When faced with the incomprehensible, one must simply smile. He looks back at the guild's headquarters, a surprisingly charming and well-maintained building that stands in stark contrast to the rough reputation of adventurers. He admits that the pleasant exterior was a calculated choice, a facade designed to lure in unsuspecting clients. Hearing this, she immediately brightens, declaring that if the guild needs a pretty face to attract business, she will gladly take on the role of their official poster girl. She urges a hesitant Kanato to keep up as she marches toward the entrance. They step through the threshold, and while she is filled with determination to begin her new life as an adventurer, Kanato can't help but feel a sense of trepidation about what lies ahead. Suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere is shattered as a massive, muscular man slams his fist onto a desk with a thunderous boom, roaring a demand to know where Jian has been idling. The force of the blow sends the captain reeling as the newcomers watch in stunned silence. The towering figure then turns his attention to the youths, his expression shifting to a fierce but professional grin as he introduces himself as Aljin, the vice captain of the Iron Fangs. He bellows a welcome, assuring them that no task is too difficult or too dirty for their guild to handle. He further explains that, despite his intimidating stature, he is also the one who manages the front desk. This revelation leaves both Kanato and Jian trembling, overwhelmed by the intense energy of the man who will apparently be their primary point of contact. He bellows at the group, demanding to know who they are if they aren't paying customers. Jian shrinks back, the sheer volume of the vice captain's voice rattling the room. In response to his outburst, Jian presents the two youngsters as the guild's newest recruits, claiming his recent absence was actually a dedicated scouting mission. He nearly slips up, mentioning his time spent slacking off before quickly correcting himself. The excuse earns him a violent slam into the floorboards, as the massive man demands he stop making excuses for his laziness. Jian can only offer a muffled apology from the crater he now occupies. Despite the brutal display, the two men are soon laughing together, with Jian explaining that they are old friends of the same age who once belonged to a different guild. Kanato watches them, deeply skeptical of the captain's claim regarding his age. As their laughter dies down, the conversation turns toward the lack of current work, with the vice captain suggesting they might need to manufacture some trouble to keep the new recruits busy. Liney listens with growing unease, sensing the predatory nature of the guild's operations. Their discussion is interrupted by the arrival of Kaminaji, a formidable member of the Iron Fangs who looks down on the newcomers with cold disdain. She questions the captain's judgment, arguing that bringing in an unranked amateur like Kanato will only tarnish the guild's reputation. Without further warning, she lunges at the boy, her movements a blur of lethal intent. She snarls that he should never have set foot in their hall, and that it is time for a harsh lesson in the guild's hierarchy. She vanishes and reappears behind him in an instant, her speed far exceeding anything the boy has ever encountered. Minato can only gasp in shock as the realization of his precarious situation finally sinks in. Liney is immediately captivated by Kaminagi's striking presence, addressing her as a beautiful lady and earnestly requesting to call her princess from that moment on. Minato watches in utter disbelief as his friend falls instantly under the warrior's intense spell. Seeing the boy's confusion, Jian explains that Kaminagi is a massive fan of a specific legend involving a knight and a princess on a quest to defeat a demon king. She has apparently decided to cast Liney in a central role within her own personal fantasy world. She takes to the new role with surprising ease, laughing off the formality and telling Kaminagi that even your highness would be perfectly acceptable. Minato can only marvel at how quickly she has adapted to the eccentricities of their new companions. Turning his attention back to the boy, Jian asks for his honest opinion on the guild's members. Minato admits they're certainly unique, though a private wave of doubt washes over him as he wonders if he truly has what it takes to stand alongside such intense individuals. The group's roles are soon solidified when Jian announces the mentorship pairings for the new recruits. While the boisterous Aljin takes charge of Liney's training in guild operations and front desk management, the realization hits Minato that he has been assigned to Kaminagi. He feels a chill run down his spine as he senses a dark, overwhelming pressure emanating from his new mentor. Jian notices his hesitation and urges him to simply be honest about the strong feelings that drove him to become an adventurer in the first place. The captain speaks with pride about the Iron Fangs, acknowledging their quirks, but emphasizing the unbreakable mental toughness that defines them. Inspired by these words, Minato realizes that this is no longer a dream. He is finally standing where he belongs. With newfound determination, he declares his intent to become an adventurer who supports others with kindness and shines with genuine strength. He is ready to prove his worth to the Iron Fangs and to himself. He stands wide-eyed as Jian delivers the sudden news, a mission starting right this moment. While the boy is caught off guard by the immediacy of the assignment, the captain remains perfectly calm, already dismissing the urgency with a casual smile and a wave of his hand. The objective is a village called Evkiv, located to the south, which has become paralyzed by an infestation of small monsters. Because the surrounding areas are crawling with these creatures, the local villagers are unable to even venture out to gather food, leaving them in a desperate state of starvation. However, the mission comes with a harsh ultimatum. If the boy proves to be a colorless burden who only slows the team down, he will be unceremoniously expelled from the Iron Fangs. While he reels from the threat, Jian turns to Kaminagi, entrusting her with the full discretion to decide the recruit's fate after seeing him in action. She accepts the challenge with a sharp, intriguing smirk, clearly relishing the authority granted to her. In contrast, the young recruit is in a state of pure shock, stammering about the fact that he only just arrived today and is already facing such a high-stakes trial that could end his career before it begins. Watching from a distance, Aljin expresses concern for the boy's apparent despair, wondering if they should intervene to help the newcomer. Hibiki, however, remains composed, suggesting that Jian likely has a deeper understanding of the situation and the boy's hidden potential than they realize. The captain's true thoughts confirm her suspicion. He believes that it is only when pushed to the absolute brink that the boy's genuine strength will finally manifest. He watches with a calculating gaze, waiting for the pressure to forge the recruit into something greater. The formal request from the mayor of Evkiv village sits as a stark reminder of the task at hand, pleading for adventurers to slay the monsters that have overrun their home and threatened their very survival. On the trade route to the village, the trial begins abruptly as a group of ravenous slimes lunges from a brush. The boy's face contorts in terror as the low-level monsters snap their toothy maws, forcing him into a desperate struggle for survival before he has even reached the village gates. He stands frozen as his companion shatters the monsters with a display of icy precision. She offers him a challenge to prove his worth. He must slay more monsters than she does throughout the course of their mission. As she turns her back on him, she adds a stinging remark, noting that such a feat is likely impossible for someone colorless like him. Left alone, he panics as a fresh swarm of toothy slimes closes in, their predatory grins mocking his helplessness. Observing his struggle from a distance, she mutters a single, cold word, pathetic. However, the boy isn't ready to give up. Reaching into his gear, he produces a massage ball, declaring that it is imbued with his own mana. With a sudden burst of super acceleration, the ball becomes a lethal projectile, tearing through the slimes in a spray of essence. He stands his ground, breathlessly introducing himself as a rookie adventurer who utilizes sea-time magic, leaving his companion visibly stunned by the unconventional display of power. Minato prepares for his task, clearing the slimes that have overrun the village outskirts. He scans the area for Kaminagi, his mind racing back to the training sessions he endured with Jian on the road to Assam. Clutching the specialized massage ball his mentor gave him, he steels his resolve, knowing he cannot afford to fail this mission now. She, meanwhile, is a whirlwind of steel and power, her blade creating a crystalline explosion that shatters the surrounding monsters into nothingness. The young practitioner can only stare in awe as she effortlessly sheathes her sword, her expression unreadable. He feels the weight of his own inexperience pressing down on him as he realizes the vast difference in their skill levels. He decides to prove his worth, unleashing his massage ball with a shout. The projectile becomes a blur of motion, accelerating to impossible speeds as it bounces between the stone pillars to strike down the remaining slimes. The creatures collapse into gelatinous heaps, seemingly defeated by his clever tactic. He watches them closely, waiting for the mission to be declared a success. His triumph turns to terror when the slimes suddenly reform, their bodies twisting into monstrous shapes with gaping, tooth-filled maws. They leap at him in a coordinated strike, catching him completely defenseless. A hand suddenly grips the back of his tunic, hauling him out of the path of the lunging beasts. Kaminagi's cold command rings in his ears, telling the rookie to move aside. She moves with lethal precision, her blade slicing through the air as she fends off the encroaching slime threat. With a sharp grunt, she hurls the boy to safety, clearing the immediate path of danger. A sudden, violent burst of energy erupts from her position, shattering the surrounding environment and neutralizing the remaining creatures in a single, decisive strike. Watching the display of power, the young boy gasps for air, his heart racing as he calls out her name in a mixture of awe and relief. Because the threat has been momentarily quelled, she stands amidst the dissipating remains, explaining the futility of mindless attacks against slimes. She notes that these fluid-like monsters will simply continue to multiply from their main body unless one targets the core directly. Looking down at him, she adds that while freezing them would be an effective alternative, such a feat is far beyond the capabilities of a colorless individual like himself. Instead of being discouraged, he looks up at her with wide, shimmering eyes, his face flushing as he expresses his sincere gratitude for the lesson. This unexpected reaction leaves her momentarily stunned, as she hadn't intended to insult him and certainly didn't anticipate such earnest enthusiasm. While she processes this, the boy eagerly begins scribbling the new information into his adventuring notebook. As she watches him, her mind drifts to the many others who once walked this path with similar hope in their eyes, only to eventually falter, give up, or vanish when faced with the harsh realities of the world. She turns her back on the boy, her expression unreadable as she muses internally about the limits of those without magic. Kanato's frantic cries barely seem to register while she contemplates how long his colorless spirit can endure in such a harsh world. Suddenly, the air is pierced by a desperate plea for help as a small child sprints through the ruins, pursued by a massive, bulbous creature with wide, hungry eyes. Reacting with predatory speed, she lunges forward to intercept the beast, her blade clashing against its hide just as it reaches the terrified pair. Kanato shouts her name in alarm as she absorbs the impact of the creature's heavy strike. The monster doesn't relent, lashing out with a powerful, whip-like tongue that shatters the stone nearby. Kanato huddles over the small boy, shielding him from the flying debris. Realizing they are outmatched in their current position, he scoops the child into his arms and bolts, his mind racing with the necessity of a tactical retreat. Behind them, the strange, gelatinous entities continue their erratic movements, their mindless hunger driving them forward through the crumbling streets. Once they find a moment of reprieve behind Stonewall, he checks on the trembling boy, who explains through tears that he only ventured out to find food for his ailing mother. As the boy apologizes for the trouble, Jian approaches from the shadows, questioning why they are still in the area despite the clear evacuation orders issued by the association. He reassures the frightened boy and Kanato, promising that they will handle the monsters before anyone in the village gets hurt. With a confident grin, he gestures toward Kaminagi, labeling her the powerhouse of their group who will resolve the crisis. Because of this bold claim, Kanato turns his attention to the warrior, bluntly stating that her current magic is unsustainable. He compares her power to a self-destructive explosion that injures her with every use, challenging her to admit that this isn't her true strength. As the warrior stares back in stunned silence, the boy admits his own limitations, acknowledging that he alone cannot save the village. However, he offers his support, pointing out a fundamental disharmony between her mana wavelength and her katana. His voice rises with desperate concern as he shouts that he simply cannot stand to see her continue to hurt herself in battle. In response to his outburst, she finally confesses a hidden truth. She hasn't been able to draw her blade since a specific past event, leaving her reliant on her volatile magic. Hearing this, he begins a rapid medical assessment, concluding that her struggle stems from extreme sensitivity to the cold. He explains the intricate link between mana and physical health, noting that her poor circulation causes her mana to plummet her body temperature, resulting in internal damage. While she reflects on the constant chill she has endured, he offers a solution, explaining that by improving her circulation and stabilizing her mana, she will regain the ability to wield her sword properly. Suddenly, the looming threat interrupts their realization as the giant slime fuses together, doubling in size and looming over the buildings. Realizing the urgency, she prepares to strike at the creature's core before it can grow any further. She stands firm as the young practitioner hesitates, reminding him that they are in the heat of combat, not a safe clinic. He worries that applying mana directly to a patient's body could cause severe internal strain, but she dismisses his caution, insisting that the life-or-death stakes of the battlefield demand such risks. The warrior declares her pride as a member of the Iron Fangs, her gaze sharp and unwavering. Realizing that hesitation will only lead to defeat, the boy resolves to trust her completely. With a surge of determination, he unleashes his sea-time magic, a technique he calls Flow Boost, to force her circulation into overdrive. His magic takes hold immediately, and she is overwhelmed by a sensation unlike any other, comparing it to the blissful warmth of a hot bath after an exhausting day. She can feel the kid's magic coursing through her entire body, along with her mana and blood, creating an internal heat so intense it feels as though it could melt ice. He pushes the technique even further, initiating a super warming circulation surge that envelopes her in a cloud of steam. The sheer intensity of the mana-induced heat radiates outward, preparing her body for the physical feat she had previously been unable to perform. While the massive, multi-eyed slime lunges forward with a terrifying roar, the young practitioner and the small boy can only watch in frozen horror. Amidst the impending strike, the swordswoman finally reaches for her weapon, her fingers closing around the hilt with a newfound strength and fluidity. With a single, lightning-fast motion, she draws her blade and carves through the gelatinous beast in a massive, shimmering arc. As the threat is neutralized, she turns back with a confident smirk, assuring her companions that she is finally warm and toasty, leaving the boy in awe of the success of his unconventional treatment. The sun hangs over the outskirts of Evkiv village, where the recent threat of slimes has finally been neutralized. Standing before the village official, the young practitioner and his companion present the proof of their success. The official reviews the report, confirming that the mission to clear the surrounding area has been completed to satisfaction. He lets out a jubilant cry, pumping his fist in the air as the official offers a word of praise for their diligent work. While he celebrates, the warrior beside him draws her blade, testing the fluidity of her movements. She notes with satisfaction that her body feels lighter and her connection to her weapon has returned to its peak. Meanwhile, the boy's excitement fades into a cold sweat as he realizes he failed to truly prove his worth during the hunt, fearing his place in the guild might be at risk. She turns her gaze toward him, her expression softening as she admits that she will likely need to rely on his unique magic much more in the future. Internally, however, she struggles to maintain her composure, wondering if the lingering effects of his treatment are causing the strange, fluttering sensation in her chest. He meets her gaze with newfound resolve, declaring his intent to grow stronger so that he can remain by her side as a reliable partner. The weight of his words sends a jolt through her, though he quickly retreats into his own thoughts, desperately trying to use the stoic teachings of his favorite chronicles to mask his own feelings of inadequacy. She suddenly recalls a specific passage from the 10th volume of A Knight's Chronicle, where the hero makes a nearly identical vow to the princess. The realization hits her like a physical blow, and she wonders if he was simply reciting lines from a story. When she asks if he is a fan of the series, he sheepishly admits he has never actually read it, only knowing the general plot. The revelation that his heartfelt words were entirely his own leaves her stunned and blushing, just as a small, familiar child runs toward them, calling out for the adventurer's attention. He stands among the villagers as they crowd around, their faces filled with genuine gratitude. One woman steps forward, her voice trembling as she asks how they could ever repay the kindness shown to their village. Kaminaji, standing nearby, tries to deflect the praise, insisting that as a knight, no thanks are necessary. As she speaks, Kinato finds himself observing the women of the village with a newfound perspective. Usually, they were just people to him, but suddenly, every one of them possesses a grace and beauty he hadn't noticed before, as if they had all stepped out of the pages of a fairy tale. This shift in perception isn't limited to him, as Kaminaji feels her own sense of self-fracturing. Having modeled her entire life and identity on the stoic knights from her favorite chronicles, she is suddenly gripped by a wave of unfamiliar emotions that leave her questioning who she truly is. While she struggles with her internal turmoil, he offers a gentle, unassuming smile to the crowd. He dismisses any talk of rewards, stating simply that his only concern was ensuring the safety of everyone in the village, an act of pure selflessness that catches her off guard. Seeing him like this, she feels a profound realization take hold. her instinct screaming that he embodies the very essence of a true knight more than any character in her books. This surge of growth and new feeling is so overwhelming that she decides she must revisit her beloved stories to find a way to interpret this change. Moments later, the young boy clings to him in a joyful embrace, a final farewell before the pair departs. Watching them, she admits to herself that perhaps understanding the heart of the princess in those stories isn't such a terrible thing after all. The journey back is quiet, and soon they arrive at the familiar entrance of the guild. He calls out a greeting as they step through the doors, expecting the usual bustle of the afternoon. Instead, they are met with a chaotic sight. Liney is undergoing a grueling, bizarre training regimen under the booming direction of Algin. The young girl is pushed to her absolute limit, her face a mask of strain as she questions the nature of beauty while performing feats of strength that leave the returning pair utterly bewildered. She is nearby as Jian welcomes the pair back to the guild hall, his voice booming with a cheerful greeting as he inquires about the success of their first mission. Because of the warm reception, the tension of the journey fades, and Jian expresses his relief at their safe return. Meanwhile, Keminaji steps forward with a newfound resolve, quietly admitting that she has finally accepted her companion. The warrior then makes a startling declaration, pointing a finger and naming him as her personal knight, a title that leaves him utterly speechless and sweating with confusion. Stunned by her declaration, he can only watch as she begins to act with an exaggerated, blushing grace, demanding to be treated like a true princess while the onlookers, including a bewildered Hibiki, wonder if a whole new side of her personality has been unlocked. Looking down with a rare vulnerability, she confesses her ignorance of such matters and asks him to teach her how to be cute and princess-like. Moments later, Liney rushes in to embrace her new friend, declaring the start of a girl squad while Jian and the other men watch from the sidelines, musing on the unpredictable nature of a woman's heart. As the excitement settles, the captain turns his attention back to the young practitioner, offering a genuine smile and a pat on the back for a job well done on his debut assignment. He then lets out a hearty laugh, confessing that he never actually intended to expel the boy regardless of the mission's outcome, revealing that the threat was merely a push to ensure his acceptance by the team. He extends a hand, officially welcoming the boy into the Iron Fangs. Kinato accepts the handshake with a bright, determined expression, expressing his eagerness to begin his journey with the guild and contribute his skills as a practitioner. Moments later, the captain informs him that the rest of the team will be arriving shortly, but there is no time for a slow introduction. He reveals that a new mission is already prepared, catching the young practitioner off guard with the sheer speed and efficiency of guild life. Meanwhile, in a different part of the capital, a heated dispute erupts between rival factions. Men shout over territory and broken deals, their faces inches apart as they claim ownership of the surrounding buildings and streets, refusing to back down from the confrontation. The shouting match intensifies, drawing the attention of passersby in the bustling city. It is a chaotic reminder that the capital is home to all sorts of volatile personalities, and today, patience is running thin among the local gangs. Watching the commotion from a distance, a weary traveler sighs and rubs the bridge of his nose. Having just returned from an exhausting, multi-day mission, the last thing he wanted to encounter upon his arrival was the idiocy of a street brawl. He tells his companion to stay back while he handles the situation. Juna groans in embarrassment, feeling the eyes of the crowd on her as she struggles to balance an enormous, overflowing backpack that makes her stand out far more than she would like. Stepping into the center of the fray, the traveler demands to know how many times he has to tell them not to fight in the open. His voice cuts through the noise of the brawlers, who stop in their tracks at the sound of his authoritative command. His cold gaze turns the crowd's aggression into pure shock as they recognize the man behind the glasses. Talius looms over them with lethal intent, warning that any further trouble for the neighborhood or the Iron Fangs will be met with a deadly response. He stood firm in the center of the cobblestone path, a solitary figure commanding the attention of two rival factions. The tension in the air was thick as the groups faced each other, yet his presence alone seemed to hold the brewing conflict at bay. Because of his authority, he let out a thunderous shout, ordering both sides to set aside their petty squabbles and cooperate on their assigned trash duty. The delinquents, cowed by his intensity, could only offer weak protests about who had started cleaning first or whose territory the litter belonged to. Amidst this bizarre dispute over garbage, he suddenly caught sight of two unfamiliar faces watching from the sidelines and demanded to know their identities. He quickly realized they were newcomers and struck a confident pose, introducing himself as Talius, an adventurer of the Iron Fangs and the very first apprentice to Jian. His initial ferocity vanished, replaced by a boisterous friendliness as he apologized for his earlier outburst, assuring the startled pair that the rough-looking men were actually harmless. He then gestured toward his companion, noting her extreme shyness. This young woman, Juna, was practically vibrating with anxiety, hiding her face and pleading not to be looked at. While Kinato watched the scene with a mixture of confusion and sweat-beaded nervousness, The apprentice explained that her height often made her feel like she stood out too much, fueling her desire to remain unseen. He encouraged the boy to build up his own courage, noting that they both had a lot to learn. The emotional weight of the story is too much for the young man with the glasses, who breaks into heavy, sobbing tears. He wipes his eyes, deeply moved by the tale of the boy's grandmother, and insists that the youth must make every effort to visit her frequently. After his outburst, he attempts to regain his composure as the group settles into their seats on the train. While he tries to shift the conversation toward the details of their upcoming mission, his companion is already distracted, happily munching on a snack. He explains that their objective is to locate a specific individual, a magical device engineer known as Ibis. The young woman beside him listens intently, her expression a mix of surprise and focus as the gravity of their task begins to sink in. As the explanation continues, the boy focuses more on his meal than the technicalities, stuffing his mouth full of food. He nods along between bites, acknowledging the plan to meet their client once they arrive at their destination. Suddenly, the young woman offers a piece of her donut to the boy, claiming it was too delicious not to share. This kind gesture immediately draws a sharp rebuke from the man in glasses, who shouts at her for interrupting the serious discussion. She shrinks back in embarrassment, admitting that seeing the boy simply triggers her maternal instincts. Despite his earlier scolding, the man's stern demeanor softens as he playfully asks for a bite of the treat himself. Sensing a lingering tension in the boy, he leans in and asks if something is bothering him. He offers sage advice, telling the youth that instead of worrying about an uncertain future, it is far better to reflect on everything he has already achieved. He points out that the very uniform the boy wears is undeniable proof of his hard work and success. With a newfound sense of pride and determination, the boy smiles brightly and vows to move forward with confidence. He steels his resolve as the train pulls into the station, reminding himself that he is an adventurer now and must gain experience to help others. Talius, ever the boisterous leader, encourages him to call him boss, though the suggestion is met with immediate rejection. Stepping off the train, he and his companions enter Kisalani, a city nestled at the base of a specialized mine and renowned for its exquisite crystal artisanry. The streets are bustling with people whose lives revolve around the mining and crafting of these precious stones. The group's leader is eager to begin their search for Ibis, but his enthusiastic rallying cry is cut short by a sudden commotion from above. A figure is plummeting through the air, prompting a frantic shout to catch her. She crashes into the street with a startled cry, apologizing profusely as she tumbles. The townspeople nearby are less than sympathetic, recognizing her and warning others to stay away from the dangerous thing she's involved with. As she picks herself up, a small, horned creature leaps to her defense, insisting that her mentor only wishes to improve everyone's lives with magical devices and that there is no danger at all. The situation quickly devolves into a heated argument. Talius is more concerned with his ruined hair than the girl's safety, while the villagers vent their frustrations, claiming her experiments have caused more trouble than they're worth. Undeterred by the criticism, the young engineer proudly presents her latest invention, the Gargantua No. 1, a device she claims will revolutionize waste management by sucking up all the trash in town. However, the moment she activates the machine, it begins to vibrate violently and emit a deafening roar, far exceeding its intended purpose and threatening to cause a major disaster in the middle of the square. She bolts away, her voice trailing off as she promises to return with a magical device capable of fixing the mess she created. The onlookers can only watch in bewilderment as she disappears around a corner. Her escape is short-lived, however, as a firm hand suddenly snatches her by the back of her collar, hoisting her into the air. She lets out a startled shriek, her limbs flailing uselessly as her momentum is brought to a jarring halt. Once she is firmly grounded, the traveler with glasses keeps a watchful eye on her, his attention drawn to a strange marking or device on her arm. She remains flustered, stammering out apologies while the girl with the massive pack approaches, her expression a mix of concern and confusion. The young engineer, now identified as Elsie, bows deeply in a frantic display of remorse toward her client, though her apologies do little to soothe the irate townspeople. They surround the group, their voices rising in a chorus of demands for compensation and formal apologies for the chaos her mentor's inventions have caused throughout the town. While she deals with the angry crowd, the captain of the Iron Fangs explains the situation to the young practitioner, noting that Elsie frequently emerges from her workshop deep in the mines to test her eccentric devices. He describes a cycle of mayhem where she attempts to sell her inventions, only for them to cause disaster before she retreats back to her secluded lab. He further elaborates that Elsie's arrival coincided with the mysterious disappearance of her mentor, Ibis, who hasn't been seen in public for some time. While the rest of the town has come to view Ibis as nothing more than a persistent nuisance, Elsie remains her most devoted defender, seemingly the only one who truly cares for the reclusive engineer. As he finishes his explanation, she looks down with a somber but resolute expression, softly insisting that her mentor is not the villain everyone believes her to be. Her voice carries a quiet conviction, a stark contrast to her earlier frantic energy. In her mind, she recalls the image of Ibis, a woman who, despite her own frequent blunders, always maintained a bright smile and a desire to help. Elsie acknowledges her own tendency to fail, yet she clings to the hope that one day her creations will bring genuine happiness to the people around her. She laughs heartily alongside Jian, her eyes bright with a renewed sense of purpose. Clutching her wrench, she declares her intent to spread joy through her work, viewing her inventions as seeds of happiness that she is finally ready to plant. Noticing the unique footwear she sports, Jian inquires if they were another of Ibis's creations. She looks down at the magical devices, confirming they were made specifically for her, and recalls her mentor's core philosophy, that magic's true purpose is to bring happiness to others. He offers a warm, genuine smile, remarking that Ibis sounds like a truly kind soul. Touched by his words, she explains the meticulous care put into the shoes, noting they were molded perfectly to the shape of her feet to ensure every step she takes is as comfortable as possible. Despite the lingering frustration over his ruined hair, Talius adjusts his glasses and begrudgingly accepts the mission, asserting his professional pride in never leaving a task unfinished. Beside him, Jian and Juna radiate confidence, promising her that they will find Ibis no matter what obstacles lie ahead. Overwhelmed by their unexpected support, her eyes well up with gratitude. She manages a bright, tearful smile as she thanks the group for their kindness, her voice trembling with the weight of her relief. Soon, the group stands at the entrance of the Kisilani mines, a breathtaking subterranean expanse also known as the Crystal Forest. They gaze in awe at the towering, jagged formations of translucent crystal that catch the light, creating a shimmering, otherworldly landscape. Eager to begin the search, Jian shouts a challenge to the cavern, declaring that the word lost isn't in his vocabulary. Talius, ever the pragmatist, warns that the dense fog permeating the mines turns the area into a treacherous, never-ending maze, while she confirms that her mentor's workshop is hidden somewhere deep within this crystalline labyrinth. As they venture further in, she reveals a deeper layer of her anxiety, admitting that there's another reason she sought their help. She confesses that the last time she saw Ibis, the engineer didn't seem to be feeling well, and the prolonged silence from the workshop has left her terrified that something terrible has happened. She and Kinato are suddenly ambushed by animated suits of armor within the foggy depths of the mine. Kinato reacts instantly, shielding her as the metal constructs lunge forward. As the dust settles, Jian and Kaminaji emerge from a mist, the captain praising the boy for his quick thinking in keeping the young engineer safe. He steps forward with a confident grin, drawing his weapon and telling the youngsters to stay back and observe. With Kaminaji at his side, her massive shield ready, he insists that it is time for the professionals to take over the fight, eager to demonstrate the true strength of the Iron Fangs. Instead of retreating, the young practitioner reaches out, placing his hands on the backs of the two adventurers. He explains that he wants to provide whatever assistance he can, channeling his unique Setai magic into their bodies to bolster their physical capabilities before they engage the enemy. He activates a flow boost, causing a visible surge of energy to ripple through Jian and Kaminaji. The effect is immediate. Jian marvels at how light his body feels, while Kaminaji gasps as she senses her strength intensifying. Kinato encourages them, noting that their movements should now feel effortless as more suits of armor close in on their position. He lunges into the fray with newfound speed, his blade carving through the animated steel with ease. Laughing with exhilaration, he shouts his approval of the boy's support, declaring that the enemy is about to learn exactly why the Iron Fangs are a force to be reckoned with. A heavy thud echoed through the rocky terrain as a massive suit of armor collapsed, defeated. This marked the beginning of a new encounter involving a rival guild. Nearby, a man in a white coat adorned with a regal crest sighed, lamenting the delay to their schedule. A small companion named Lamia chirped up, asking if they could take a trophy home, only to be met with a sharp reprimand. Meanwhile, Talius adjusted his glasses with a smirk, standing alongside Kinato and Juna. The air was still thick with the residue of the magic they had just unleashed. He marveled at the sheer force of their combined power, noting how a single strike had been enough to bring down the enchanted armor. Juna agreed, her eyes wide as she processed the incredible effectiveness of their coordinated effort. Feeling particularly boastful, the swordsman began to show off his agility with exaggerated movements. Kinato watched with sparkling eyes, his earnest admiration causing Juna to blush with embarrassment at the boy's intensity. The young practitioner rubbed the back of his head, bashfully downplaying his role, but Talius was quick to offer his thanks. He He acknowledged that their magic felt significantly more potent than usual, attributing the success entirely to Kanado's support. They shared a moment of camaraderie, with Juna noting how light her body felt and Talius suggesting they might actually make a formidable team. Kanado could only offer a humble protest as they celebrated their apparent victory. However, the celebration was cut short by a mechanical grinding sound. To their horror, the fallen armor began to stir, slowly hauling itself back onto its feet as the realization dawned on them that the fight was far from over. He watched in awe as a blinding flash of power tore through the air, reducing the regenerating armor to scrap in an instant. Standing before the wreckage was a man whose back bore a grand, winged crest, radiating an aura of effortless authority. Following the devastating blast, two newcomers stepped into the clearing. A boisterous young man with light hair cheered about earning hero points, while his companion, a composed woman with glasses, chided him for his lack of professionalism and for neglecting his duties. As the dust settled, the young man lamented the state of his sword, though his spirits remained high. The woman identified them as members of the Seraph Wings, the kingdom's premier guild, a revelation that left Kanado and Talius reeling in disbelief as they realized who had intervened. Stepping forward with practiced grace, the woman introduced herself as Lamia, alongside her partner, Zio. With a flick of her wrist, she presented a business card, declaring that they performed their duties with unwavering pride and efficiency. This formal introduction did little to ease the tension, as Talius immediately began bickering with the arrogant Zio. Kanado tried to intervene, but his voice was drowned out by their heated exchange over what a friendship club like theirs was doing in such a dangerous place. Fed up with the noise, Lamia swiftly silenced her partner, noting it took only 5 seconds for him to become a nuisance. Undeterred, Zio turned his aggression back toward Talius, loudly challenging him to a one-on-one fight to settle their differences once and for all. While the two hotheads continued to clash in the background, Kanado turned his attention to the business card in his hand. He looked toward Juna, seeking clarification on the true nature and reputation of the Seraph Wings, wondering why they were so famous. Sensing his confusion, Juna explained that while there were many guilds in the kingdom, the Seraph Wings stood above them all. They were not just another group of adventurers. They were the largest and most influential organization in the land, known for their elite members. She listens intently as the conversation turns to the overwhelming reputation of the Seraph Wings, the kingdom's most elite guild. Talius explains that most adventurers avoid cities where they operate to prevent their jobs from being poached, yet their own guild is headquartered right in the capital, seemingly inviting conflict with the strongest. The man in the white coat, the leader of the rival guild, leans in with a condescending smirk, questioning if the Iron Fangs are driven by sheer tenacity or simple foolishness. He remarks that the greater the rival, the more satisfying it is to eventually crush them. He is met with a cold dismissal from Talius, who flatly states he has no time for such petty arguments. While the tension simmers, the Seraph Wings members continue their efficient destruction of the remaining armor golems, clearing the area with practiced ease. The swordsman watches as a sudden, violent explosion of magic obliterates another target, a display of the leader's overwhelming power. The man in the white coat emphasizes that their schedule is packed, and they cannot afford any delays. He clarifies that their presence is strictly professional, as their client holds the rights to the Crystal Forest and needs the armor golems cleared for mining. He assumes that the Iron Fangs were also drawn here by the prospect of salvaging the enchanted suits. He is corrected by Talius, who reveals that their objective is far more personal. They're searching for a missing person named Ibis. The news seems to catch the Seraph Wings leader off guard, his expression shifting to one of mild surprise. The young man is met with a thin, calculated smile from the rival leader, who requests that they stay out of his way to avoid any accidental crossfire. He maintains that his primary concern is public safety and the elimination of the golems. He watches as Zio steps forward with a mocking laugh, loudly belittling Talius for being a mere colorless novice. Zio scoffs at the idea of a month-old adventurer aiming for high-level missions, while Juna looks on, worried by the escalating hostility. He continues his boastful display, explaining that the badges on their armbands represent their skill levels, ranging from colorless to gold. With a smug grin, he declares himself a gold rank, a prodigy destined to become a regalia, standing above all other adventurers. Hearing this, the young practitioner is struck with disbelief, realizing that despite starting their journeys at the same time, the swordsman has already reached such heights. Even the other members of the Seraph Wings seem intimidated by the sheer speed of their comrades' growth. Tiring of the posturing, the leader of the Seraph Wings orders his group to move out and finish their mission. Though the Golden Rank youth is eager to settle things then and there, he is dragged away by his teammates, leaving a frustrated Talius behind. As the rival guild departs, the conversation shifts to the mysterious suits of armor scattered about, which Juna reveals were originally magical gadgets crafted by Ibis herself. Talius recalls seeing them assist others in the past, though they were prone to occasional, harmless malfunctions. The peaceful discussion is shattered by a sudden, frantic scream as a man is pursued by one of the very constructs they were discussing. While the others watch in alarm, the young boy notices a strange tension in the golem's movements and prepares to intervene. Recognizing the armor as the one they had previously incapacitated, he lunges forward before anyone can stop him. Instead of a physical strike, he applies his specialized sea-time magic directly to the metal plates, seeking to induce a state of magical relaxation. He explains to a bewildered Talius that because the golem is a magical device governed by a formula, his techniques should be able to ease the internal pressure. As he works, he spots an intricate magical script etched into the surface of the armor, confirming his theory. To everyone's absolute shock, the suit of armor lets out a jovial laugh and begins to speak, admitting it has found itself in quite an embarrassing predicament. The young healer recoils in terror, his mind racing at the impossible realization that the machine possesses a voice and a personality. Continuing its explanation, the golem speaks of its creator's noble character, describing her as a selfless individual who works tirelessly to improve the lives of others. It reveals that the recent hostility was a defensive measure. Thieves had been targeting the mine's crystals, a vital resource for the people of Kisalani, necessitating the deployment of guardians. A record of the engineer's work comes to light, detailing the mundane but essential tasks she undertook for the villagers. Among the entries is a note regarding a malfunctioning alarm clock belonging to a couple named Jose, illustrating the breadth of her local contributions. As they look over the extensive list of community concerns, the depth of the woman's dedication becomes clear. From heating issues in a neighbor's room to helping a local woman improve her knitting efficiency, she had been documenting every small struggle with the intent of finding a magical solution. The memory of her at her workbench, surrounded by tools and blueprints, underscores her singular ambition. Her dream was never for power or fame, but simply to create magical gadgets that could ease the burdens of every person she met. Realizing the potential of the magical bond between creator and creation, the boy suggests they use that link to track her down. The golem confirms that its very animation is powered by a formula written in her mana, and while it cannot pinpoint her exact coordinates, it can feel her presence through the thick fog. With renewed determination, the young practitioner focuses his senses, confident that he can trace the lingering trail of her energy. He urges the others to follow him, certain that the path to the missing engineer is finally within their grasp. The young practitioner analyzed the situation, calculating that the range of control likely didn't extend beyond the crystal forest. He realized that if the armor's movement was fueled by Ibis's mana, he could treat the magic formula like the pathways of a human body, flushing out the influence like a toxin. He focused his mind, knowing that if he could unravel the specific magic formula woven by her mana, it would be just like following the familiar pathways he used in his medical practice. With a look of intense determination, the boy committed to the task, certain that his mastery over mana control would allow him to navigate the complex route. He struck with precision, invoking a relaxation technique that caused the enchanted armor to shudder and begin to break apart as the magic holding it together was neutralized. He immediately broke into a sprint, urging the others to follow as he searched for the core hidden within the swirling magical fog. Behind him, the group watched in awe, with Talius questioning who else would ever think to visualize a magic formula in such a way, while Juna and Elsie expressed their genuine amazement at the feat. He continued to push forward, unaware that Talius was mentally praising his incredible ability to connect the dots in real time, a task that would normally be impossible without leaving traces behind. A familiar, energetic voice suddenly called out to him, as Zio appeared with a wide grin, recognizing him as the hero from the Seraph Wings incident and loudly praising his exceptional mana control. He and his companions were far from the town of Kisalani, where news of Elsie's departure for the Crystal Forest had just reached the local residents, sparking a wave of shock and disbelief. The townspeople gathered in the streets, their voices hushed with worry as they discussed the dire situation. They knew Elsie wouldn't stop until she found Ibis, but the thought of her venturing out with unknown adventurers and that strange, hollow suit of armor filled them with a deep sense of dread for her safety. A stern voice cut through the murmurs, ordering the workers back to their stations to resume production. Yet even as they complied, they reflected on how much they missed Ibis. Despite her reputation as a troublemaker, she was the backbone of their work and the only person who could truly bring a smile to Elsie's face. Amidst the town's struggle, a man named Sid, the current mayor's boyfriend, paraded through the streets with Maria at his side, boasting about the need for development while Maria, having seized the mayoral seat from her father, ignored the protests of the citizens who demanded to know why she was making all the decisions regarding the city's future. Looming over a disgruntled resident, Sid accused the townsfolk of illicitly mining crystals and diverting the supply for their own gain. and with a predatory grin, he offered to sell the very resources they had harvested back to them, knowing full well that Kisalani's famous crafts would be impossible to produce without them. The couple shared a private, malicious laugh as they watched the townspeople's despair, revealing that they had spent a fortune hiring the Seraph Wings to clean out the crystal forest, intending to eliminate any interference and claim the crystal mines entirely for themselves. Far from these political machinations, the energetic swordsman let out a cry of pure disbelief, unable to wrap his head around the fact that the boy standing before him was only 15 years old, exactly his own age. Overjoyed by this revelation, he practically vibrated with excitement, asking if he could call the boy by his name without any formalities. It was a rare treat for him to find a fellow adventurer of the exact same age who had started their journey at the same time, and he was determined to forge a bond of friendship. He continues to cling to the young practitioner, his boisterous energy overwhelming the boy. Kinato, caught off guard by the sudden physical affection, stammers through his confusion, unsure of how to respond to such an intense display of camaraderie. Undeterred by the awkwardness, the swordsman declares with unwavering conviction that he was born to be a hero for all eternity. He then turns the conversation toward his new companion, questioning the motivations that led the boy to take up the life of an adventurer. As the group makes their way down a familiar path, the self-proclaimed hero takes charge, playfully awarding Kinato 20 hero points for his efforts while the others bicker over who is actually in command. The atmosphere is light as they recognize the road leading back toward their destination, spotting the workshop in the distance. He shares his grand ambition, to have a bronze statue erected in his honor, not for vanity, but as a symbol of hope to improve the lives of everyone in the kingdom. With his own goals laid bare, he asks the young healer what dreams drive his own journey. Their conversation is interrupted as they reach a large, industrious structure nestled against the rocky terrain, its massive gears and water wheel churning steadily. This is the workshop where the master engineer resides. The young apprentice, Elsie, dashes ahead with frantic energy, her voice echoing through the workshop as she calls out for a mentor. Kinato follows close behind, his eyes taking in the impressive scale of the engineering marvel. Upon entering, they are met with a chilling sight. The master engineer lies collapsed on the cold floor, her body covered in intricate, glowing markings that seem to pulse with an unnatural energy. She weakly warns them away as they rush to her side, revealing that she had specifically instructed the others to stay clear of the workshop. The young apprentice's concern only grows as she stares at the strange state of her master's body. She lies broken on the floor as a mysterious woman stands over her, warning the others not to interfere. The assailant explains that the intricate magic formula Ibis inscribed has backfired, causing mana to surge uncontrollably through her body and erode her from within, a fatal error that has left her defenseless. The newcomer expresses relief at her foresight, having already restrained the impulsive Zio with nearly invisible threads. She explains that her client is terrified of the wandering suits of armor plaguing the area, and since Ibis is the suspected cause, she intends to eliminate the engineer, whom she deems too weak to survive the rampant magic anyway. Her gaze remains cold and analytical as she reiterates that the engineer is a liability that must be taken care of to satisfy her mission. Kinato, however, watches her with growing defiance, his mind racing to find a way to save his friend from this heartless executioner. She is met with fierce resistance as Kinato refuses to accept her cold logic, shouting that Ibis dedicated her life to helping the town and shouldn't be discarded like a broken tool. The woman remains unmoved, her simple denial cutting through his emotional plea as she prepares to finish her grim task, indifferent to the engineer's past contributions. He channels every ounce of his energy into a desperate gamble, unleashing his sea-time magic with a roar. This ultimate boost is designed to relax and release the tension of the soul, a non-violent but overwhelming technique intended to neutralize the threat without further bloodshed. His sudden surge of power catches the woman off guard, her composure finally cracking as the wave of magic washes over her. Behind him, his companions from the Iron Fangs cheer him on with desperate shouts, urging him to hold nothing back even as they fear the strain of such a massive output might tear his very arms apart. She feels an unnatural lethargy spreading through her limbs, her very muscles refusing to obey her commands as the magic takes hold. In her mind, the world shifts into a hazy, dreamlike state of absolute comfort, as if she were lounging in soft pajamas, stripping away her aggression and her will to fight. She collapses to the floor, the threads of her control severed by the overwhelming sensation of peace. The gentle magic has not only subdued her, but has radiated outward, leaving everyone in the room, friend and foe alike, momentarily drained of their desire for conflict as they succumb to the forced tranquility. She watches him with a cold, calculating eye, even as the weight of his magic forces her into submission. Kinato, his face still etched with the glowing lines of his ultimate technique, exhales slowly, the immense strain of the battle finally beginning to take its toll on his young body. He is suddenly caught off guard as a small figure lunges forward, breaking the heavy silence. Elsie throws her arms around him in a desperate, crushing embrace, her relief manifesting as a forceful collision that nearly knocks him back. He looks down at the sobbing girl, his expression softening as he realizes the depth of the fear she had been holding back. With a gentle tone, he offers a sincere apology for causing her such worry, while she can only manage to choke out how glad she is that he is safe, her tears soaking into his tunic as she clings to him. The young boy stuffs his face with the local delicacies, his cheeks bulging as he savors every bite. An encouraging voice from across the table urges him to keep eating as much as he likes, a sentiment he heartily agrees with through a muffled exclamation of delight. Nearby, his companion with the glasses adjusts his spectacles while enjoying his skewer, remarking that the food truly hits the spot. The host is pleased to hear such high praise from the travelers who have done so much for their community. The joy is infectious, reaching the young woman with a massive pack, who finds herself completely captivated by the incredible quality of the sweets. She expresses her immense relief that both the young apprentice and their engineer friend are safe, her eyes sparkling with happiness. The entire hall erupts in laughter and cheers as the host, a boisterous man with a wide grin, announces his intention to treat all the adventurers to this grand feast. It is a moment of pure celebration, a hard-earned respite after the recent trials they faced together. Despite the festive atmosphere, the young practitioner looks slightly sheepish, offering a quiet apology for the ruckus his energetic companions are making. Behind him, the others continue to eat with gusto, oblivious to his mild embarrassment. He eventually strikes up a conversation with one of the locals, admitting that the lively scene reminds him of his own hometown. The villager explains that while the townspeople might get a little wild, it is only because such parties are rare in their secluded artisan village. The captain of the Iron Fangs cannot help but boast, loudly proclaiming the invincibility of their guild to anyone within earshot. The boy tries to downplay the praise, feeling a bit flustered by the formal thanks being offered for protecting the young apprentice. As the boisterous laughter of his guild mates continues in the background, the engineer approaches him with a more serious expression. She asks if he can spare a minute for a private conversation, her young apprentice standing quietly by her side. She pulls him into a sudden, tight embrace, catching the young practitioner completely off guard. Holding him close, she speaks with a heavy sincerity, acknowledging that without his magic, the town and its people would have suffered far greater damage. The boy can only stare in wide-eyed surprise as she continues, expressing her deep gratitude for him traveling so far in his role as an adventurer. Returning the sentiment with a humble tone, he admits he is simply relieved to have been of some assistance during the crisis. She finally releases her grip, looking him in the eye with a soft expression and adding that she is truly glad he emerged from the ordeal unharmed. Elsewhere in the aftermath, a cold and professional woman oversees the containment of the situation, explaining her presence as a measure to halt illegal business dealings, while Jian boisterously welcomes Kinato back into the fold. In front of her, the disgraced mayor and her companion strain against their bindings, shouting in desperate, futile protest against the lack of proof for their crimes. The operative remains unmoved, coldly stating that her organization, the Seraph Wings, never fails their mission. She then demands her payment, noting the total destruction of the rogue enchanted armors. She stands impassively as the corrupt pair turns on each other in the wake of their capture. Maria shrieks in betrayal, labeling her partner a snake, while he pathetically pleads for mercy, claiming he was forced into the scheme and offering up the location of incriminating evidence in their safe to save his own skin. Later, as the dust settles from the arrests, Talius approaches Kinato with a tray of food to restore his strength. His eyes narrow as he spots a fresh wound on the boy's arm, questioning why a practitioner of his caliber hasn't simply mended his own flesh with magic. He shakes his head with a faint, sheepish smile, admitting a strange limitation to his abilities. For some reason, his restorative power fails him whenever he attempts to turn it inward, leaving him unable to control the magic on his own body. The young healer clarifies his philosophy, stating that his gift is meant for the service of others rather than his own benefit. He seems content with this restriction, though his companion listens in silence, his expression unreadable behind his spectacles. He listens as the veteran adventurer offers a stern word of advice, insisting that the boy must climb the guild's hierarchy. Talius warns that remaining at the bottom tier as a colorless member will eventually become a liability for the Iron Fangs as a whole. The boy absorbs the weight of those words, the reality of his new responsibilities and the expectations of his guild beginning to sink in. Meanwhile, in the heart of Kisalani City Plaza, a crowd gathers under the moonlight. Elsie fidgets with nervous anticipation, watching as Ibis prepares a grand demonstration. The engineer reassures her apprentice that while the previous attempt failed, this time will be different, as the townspeople whisper in curiosity about the spectacle they were summoned to witness. Suddenly, The ground begins to vibrate with a heavy, rhythmic thrum. A massive, steam-belching contraption rolls into the square, its mechanical bulk casting long shadows and drawing gasps of awe from the startled citizens. The crowd gasps in disbelief as Ibis's workshop begins to lift off the ground, defying gravity. Elsie watches with wide-eyed wonder as the massive structure rumbles, ascending above the city streets. Seeing the monumental task ahead, Jian and the others offer their support, reminding Kanado that he nearly died trying to create this device. He is taken aback by their sudden willingness to help him with the project. Despite the offer, he remains hesitant, explaining that his mana control is insufficient to maintain the continuous force required. Talius and Elsie listen as he admits that while he appreciates the gesture, the stability of the invention is still in question. The group gathers in the workshop, where the atmosphere is thick with anticipation. He senses the mounting pressure, wondering if they're all about to be pushed to their absolute limits. Suddenly, Zio erupts with a burst of manic energy, his face contorted in a shout as he channels his power. He screams about his hero energy, the sheer force of his spirit radiating outward. Inspired by this display, Elsie initiates the magic formula, her eyes gleaming with excitement behind her goggles. Zio cheers her on from the sidelines, urging her to keep up the momentum as the machinery hums to life. During a brief moment of quiet, she shares a personal dream with him while flipping through a book of botanical illustrations. She confesses that although flowers cannot grow in this barren region, she finds joy in studying their images. Looking out over the crystal city from the heights of the floating workshop, she declares her ultimate goal. She intends to use this incredible machine to transform the landscape into a vibrant meadow of flowers. She watches as her creation erupts into a spectacular display, a crystal flower burst that paints the night sky with shimmering floral light. The townspeople below are awestruck, their faces illuminated by the artificial meadow blooming above them, a sight far more beautiful than any ordinary firework. Despite the beauty of the moment, the young engineer remains focused at her controls, sweat beading on her brow as she pours her heart into the machine. She offers a sincere apology to those she might have inconvenienced, but her voice rings with a newfound resolve. She is determined to continue crafting magical gadgets, promising to create truly great things, even if she stumbles along the way. This determination stemmed from a past filled with the weight of others' expectations, where the townspeople would constantly demand she fix mundane items like broken lawnmowers or focus only on what they deemed useful. In those moments, she had felt the crushing pressure to conform, her own creative spirit stifled by the narrow needs of the village. Breaking through those memories, a boisterous laugh echoes across the deck as the workshop soars high above the city's rooftops. The self-proclaimed hero stands tall, confidently declaring that the group can leave the rest to him, his energy as vibrant as the lights still flickering in the sky. As the workshop stabilizes, the two companions find a moment of quiet on the stone steps, looking out over the horizon. The young healer speaks softly, expressing his genuine happiness for the engineer's success and the realization of her dream. He listens as his friend reflects on his own journey, explaining his obsession with accumulating hero points and how he has come to understand that kindness, when pushed to its absolute limit, transforms into unwavering determination. The warrior turns with a sincere smile, thanking the healer for helping him truly grasp what it means to be a hero. In the wake of this revelation, the swordsman issues a surprising challenge, stating that he would eventually like to face his companion in a true test of strength. The healer is caught off guard, his eyes widening at the thought of going toe-to-toe with someone he considers so much more powerful. He ponders this challenge, admitting to himself that while he may never live up to the grand expectations others have for him, he cannot simply stop where he is. With his dream of becoming an adventurer burning brighter than ever, he realizes that his journey is only just beginning. He looked at his rival with newfound determination, vowing to embrace a greater ambition so that one day he might truly stand as an equal in the world of adventurers. Under the soft glow of the moonlight and festive decorations, the two shared a quiet moment of mutual respect, their paths diverging but their spirits linked by the promise of future challenges. However, far from the peaceful streets of the town, the gears of high politics began to turn once more as the kingdom's Council of 12 reconvened. In the hallowed, silent halls of power, a man with a scarred face and a heavy gaze stood ready, the weight of the realm's future resting upon the shoulders of those who walk these corridors. The kingdom's stability rests upon the pillars of the Adventurers Association and the Magic Research Society, all overseen by the grand authority of the Royal Council. Within the ornate halls of the capital, the Council of 12 gathers for a high-stakes meeting. The chairwoman, a woman of sharp intellect and spectacles, struggles to maintain order as boisterous calls for adventure echo through the chamber. He, referring to the boisterous Algin, roars with laughter boldly declaring his intent to trade his seat for the open road, much to the annoyance of a stern elderly colleague who scolds his lack of decorum. Amidst the chaos, Jian remains composed, watching the scene with a faint, knowing smile. This diverse assembly, known as the Council of 12, brings together a wide array of personalities, from proud grandfathers to weary veterans like the scarred man who longs for the quiet of home. As the room buzzes with talk of Jian's newly formed guild and playful challenges to spar, the chairwoman fixes him with a steady gaze, her voice cutting through the noise to address the grave matter at hand. Suddenly, a violent magical tremor ripples through the air, punctuated by a sharp cry of pain as an unseen force seems to unlock a hidden power, leaving the council members reeling in shock. Once the immediate threat subsides, she, the chairwoman, reveals the chilling reason for this emergency summons, a series of unexplained disappearances targeting magic users across the realm. With the grim confirmation of several deaths, the council members, including the scarred veteran and his monocled peer, listen in somber silence as the order is given to hunt down the shadow responsible for these atrocities. She listens as the young practitioner, Kanato, leans forward with a wide, almost manic grin, suggesting a simple solution. Just eliminate anyone who seems suspicious. He then glances nervously at the massive, intimidating figure of Aljan beside him, whispering a plea to change seats. She remains unmoved by the boy's antics, her gaze sharp behind her spectacles as she addresses the entire Council of 12. Her voice is cold and authoritative, declaring that their absolute priority is now the identification and elimination of any individual who poses even the slightest threat to the kingdom's stability. Following the formal proceedings, the group of adventurers stands together outside, receiving heartfelt thanks for their recent efforts. Kinato, Jin, Talius, Juna, and Ibis all look on, acknowledge for the significant help they provided during the crisis. He leads the way as they begin to disperse, his tone light as he encourages them to keep up their spirited banter, though he adds a firm warning not to let their playfulness turn into actual conflict. The exchange is amicable, a rare moment of peace after the tension of the council meeting. She waves a cheerful farewell to the others, promising to do everything in her power to assist in the future. With a bright smile, she reminds them that if they ever find themselves in need of a specialized magical gadget, they know exactly who to call. He, however, chooses a far less graceful exit, sprinting away with a boisterous, mocking laugh. He shouts back insults, calling them losers and expressing a mocking hope that their paths never cross again as he disappears into the distance. As night falls over the city, a different sort of presence emerges in the dimly lit streets. A trio of figures, a towering, cloaked man, a woman in a somber black dress, and another in striking, dark attire, walk together, one of them wondering aloud if they've been pushed too hard lately, while another suggests finding a place to eat. They draw the attention of the local residents, who watch from the shadows with a mixture of curiosity and unease. No one recognizes these newcomers, their presence a sudden, unexplained ripple in the quiet evening of the town. The town square was filled with the prominent factions of the region. The Iron Fangs, the magical gadget engineer, and the Seraph Wings all gathered for what seemed to be a formal assembly. Standing beside the tall, cloaked figure, she mused on their good fortune, viewing the gathered heroes as nothing more than sacrificial lambs for her master. This arrogance immediately drew the ire of Aljan, who roared at her to stop wandering around and leave the area at once. She didn't hesitate, lunging forward to clamp her hand onto his face with unnatural strength, while staring him down with a cold, murderous gaze. While he groaned in agony under her touch, she turned her chilling smile toward the others, including a stunned Kinato and Talius, wishing for them all to become worthy offerings. The air grew heavy as a monstrous skeletal beast materialized from the shadows, forcing Hibiki to take charge and order Ibis to evacuate the civilians immediately. Panic erupted through the streets as the ground shattered, sending the terrified citizens fleeing for their lives from the emerging nightmare. The captain, however, refused to back down, sensing the overwhelming bloodlust from the creature and charging forward with his blade to intercept the strike. He lunges forward, a desperate roar tearing from his throat as he strikes at the massive skeletal beast. The dark-haired woman watching the carnage merely smirks, unimpressed by his resolve to save the town. Even as he unleashes a rapid-fire acceleration technique, she effortlessly brushes him aside, mocking his strength as pitifully inadequate. The impact sends him crashing into the stone pavement with bone-shattering force. Gasping for air through the blood pooling in his mouth, he watches his friends' faces twist in horror. He realizes with a sinking dread that his limbs won't obey him, and the realization that his foe is a colorless, a being of immense, unpredictable power, leaves him paralyzed as the townspeople scream in the background. Above him, the skeletal monstrosity continues its relentless assault, reducing the surroundings to rubble with a single, sweeping blow. The summoner's voice rings out with cold disdain, labeling them all fools for wasting their magical gifts on mundane trifles while she wields the power of true destruction. The terrified crowd cringes, trapped in the shadow of the beast's looming skull. In the depths of his despair, his mind drifts back to the simple dream that started it all, the desire to be a kind adventurer who exists solely to support others. He recalls the faces of those who accepted him, like Zio, and the encouragement from those far stronger than himself, feeling a bitter sting of shame at how far he has fallen from that idea. He had allowed himself to believe he was finally becoming a true adventurer, prideful of his ability to balance the mana of his comrades. Looking at the memory of his team standing together, he sees now that he was merely a passenger, relying on their strength while contributing only from the sidelines. Gritting his teeth, he forces his battered body to stir, his gaze fixed on the innocent people cowering before the monster. A fierce, new fire ignites in his eyes as he accepts a harsh truth. If he cannot stand and fight on his own, there is no way he can ever hope to protect the kindness of those around him. The memory of a young girl's hopeful smile flashes before him, her wish for her magic to help others echoing his own deepest longing. It was that shared dream of becoming an adventurer that drove him this far, and he refuses to let it end in the dirt. With a final, desperate resolve, he reaches for the volatile magic within, knowing the risks are absolute. Though he has never been able to control the energy when turned inward upon his own body, he clutches his chest and prepares to unleash the burden, gambling everything on one last, explosive transformation. He unleashes the full force of his sea-time magic, a concentrated burst of energy that tears through the air with a deafening boom. The impact forces a pained grunt from the skeletal beast as it staggers back under the weight of the blow. From the sidelines, his companions watch in a mixture of terror and awe, their voices lost in the roar of the battle as they desperately call out his name, fearing the cost of such power. He doesn't stop there, pushing his body beyond its limits to activate a super acceleration boost. The sheer speed of his movement creates a shockwave that ripples through the surroundings. His face is a mask of bloody determination, eyes wide with the strain of the power coursing through his veins. He bellows a vow to protect his home, declaring with every fiber of his being that he will not allow another ounce of destruction to befall the town or its people. Liney recounts a childhood memory to Kamenaji, explaining the reason behind Kanato's reluctance to heal himself. She recalls a time when they were young, and he used his magic to save her from wild animals in the mountains. Though he succeeded, his lack of control at the time resulted in severe injuries that nearly cost him his life. She continues, noting that he has always prioritized the well-being of others over his own. Kamenaji listens intently, concluding that his hesitation stems from that past trauma and a desire to avoid causing his grandmother any further worry. Meanwhile, the reality of the present conflict is far more brutal as Kanato stands his ground against the massive skeletal beast. Despite the blood staining his clothes and the visible strain on his face, he refuses to back down, even as Talius watches on with concern. He takes a moment to assess the damage, noting the deep lacerations on his leg from the landing and the state of his torn hand. The pain is intense, but his resolve is stronger. He is determined to stop the creature, no matter the cost to his own body. Facing the monstrosity, he considers the mechanics of mana acceleration to bolster his physical strength. While the concept is simple, he knows that the true power lies in the precision of a user, a fact the beast seems to acknowledge after feeling the weight of his previous strike. The creature looms over him, its hollow eyes glowing with malice as it mocks his perceived weakness. It questions if he is even fighting seriously, its massive jaws snapping as it prepares for another assault. From a distance, the woman responsible for this carnage watches the spectacle with a twisted sense of amusement. She finds the sounds of the struggle adorable, though she finds the overall noise of the battle somewhat irritating. She reflects on her past encounters, noting that while she has faced many mages, none have proven to be worthy sacrifices. For her, the thrill of the hunt is a fleeting moment, and she remains unimpressed by the current display of resistance. She continues her mockery, her voice echoing through the skeletal beast. She sneers at the fragility of their training, dismissing the humans as mere insects who break far too easily under the slightest pressure. With a sudden, violent movement, the beast lunges, forcing the boy to scramble back. She taunts him further, asking if he has a death wish and why he dares to challenge her when he is so clearly outmatched and unprepared for a real battle. Suddenly, an explosion of light and sound disrupts the assault as Talius leaps into the fray, shouting a warning about an approaching ogre. The summoner's voice turns sharp with irritation, demanding to know who has dared to interfere with her sport. While the chaos unfolds, Talius and Juna rush to the fallen boy's side, their faces etched with concern for his battered state. They urge him to stop his reckless self-sacrifice and instead focus his magic on supporting them. But he realizes that to maintain his healing arts, He must remain in the heart of the danger, regardless of the cost to himself. His eyes burn with a newfound, fierce resolve as he stares down the nightmare before him. He silently vows that he will not let this monster escape, even if it requires him to push his body beyond its absolute breaking point. Seeing the desperation in his gaze, Juna turns away, unable to hide her distress at the toll the battle is taking. Beside her, Talius remains grimly focused, recognizing the weight of the choice the young healer is making. He stands firm, his silhouette small but defiant against the backdrop of the burning village he is sworn to protect. Though his hands tremble with exhaustion and fear, the strength of his will is undeniable, a fact that Talius acknowledges with a silent, somber respect. The moment of respite is shattered as a massive, horned beast looms over Talius, its presence overwhelming. He roars for the others to flee for their lives, knowing full well that he stands little chance against such a titan alone. He stares ahead, teeth grit in a mask of grim determination, the weight of the situation etched into the lines of his face. The thought of retreating is a poison. If he turns back now, there will be no one left to stand between the innocent and the encroaching darkness. This display of courage does not go unnoticed by Jian, who watches with a newfound respect for the young man's solid resolve. As the ogre's roar echoes through the ruins, the captain places a steadying hand on his comrade's shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the fire burning within him. Shaking off his own momentary lapse, the captain turns his attention to the wounded Kinato, offering a brief apology for the delay. He is invigorated now, refusing to let the boy's unwavering spirit be in vain as he prepares to rejoin the fray. Together, the two members of the Iron Fangs stand tall, their voices rising in a defiant shout that rings across the battlefield. They swear an oath to protect the town and to bring down the hooded figure responsible for this chaos, their shared purpose forging an unbreakable bond. High above, the summoner peers down with a cold, mocking gaze, her voice dripping with disdain as she questions their ability to protect anything at all. Below her, the group looks up, the shadow of her malice looming over them like a physical weight. Before they can react, the Bone Wolf strikes with a brutal, bone-shattering force that sends Kinato crashing into the debris. The summoner sneers at the fallen boy, unimpressed that a single blow was enough to silence the brat who dared to defy her. Seeing her friend crumpled among the ruins, Juna cries out in terror, her voice cracking as she rushes toward him. Despite the blood and the dust, he struggles to push himself up, his voice a strained rasp as he insists that he is still in the fight. Stepping forward to cover the retreat, the young man with glasses begins to weave his magic, explaining the intricate mechanics of his summoning arts. He can call forth goblins to serve as decoys or projectiles, swapping places with them in a flash, though he warns that his power has its limits as he prepares for a final stand. He watches as Jian rallies the group, declaring that the Iron Fangs will now take charge of the battlefield and urging Kinato to find his second wind. His words are punctuated by the sudden, violent lunge of the skeletal beast, which slams into the earth with bone-shattering force while its master looks on. The creature's rampage provides a backdrop for Jian to square off against the massive ogre, quickly deducing the simple patterns behind its monstrous strength. He manages to hold the line, forcing the summoner to realize that the young boy and his companions are far more resilient than she anticipated. She sneers at Talius as he fires his arrows, mocking his reliance on teleportation even as he prepares his final tactical shift. While he maneuvers, Kinato is forced into a corner by the Bone Wolf, but the boy refuses to yield, focusing his magic into a single, desperate burst of speed. The young practitioner takes the beast head-on assault, using the momentum to line up a counterstrike that rattles the creature's very frame. He delivers a crushing blow with his fractured fist, stunning his allies with his sheer grit as he orders the enemies to leave his home. The young Setai practitioner remains standing in the wreckage, surrounded by the aftermath of the battle. He collapses to his knees, gasping for air. The realization hits him that his mana is depleted. He cannot sustain both his ocular ability and his physical enhancement. The toll on his body is far greater than he anticipated. As he trembles, barely able to keep himself upright, a dark presence looms. The skeletal beast watches him with a twisted sense of satisfaction, its voice echoing with a chilling delight at his suffering. The summoner behind the beast speaks, her voice dripping with predatory interest. She admits that his strike was powerful and decides that sacrificing him would be a waste. Instead, she intends to claim him for her own purposes. Nearby, his allies watch the desperate struggle. Talius grinds his teeth in frustration, unable to believe the boy's stubborn refusal to yield, while Jian looks on with a mix of concern and awe. Breaking the tension with a sharp clap of her hands, the woman commands the attention of everyone present, her tone shifting to one of mock authority as she prepares her next move. Suddenly, a torrent of oppressive, dark energy erupts from her, swirling into the air like a physical weight. She taunts them, demanding they stay rooted in their fear and pleading for them not to perish before her display is complete. Despite the crushing pressure, the young practitioner forces his eyes open, his gaze hardening with a renewed, desperate resolve. He knows he has only a fraction of his strength left, but he is determined to end this confrontation here and now, a defiance that only seems to further amuse his captor. The captain stands tall amidst the swirling dark energy, looming over the skeletal remains of the beast with calm dominance. He looks down with a smirk, declaring that playtime is over before his foot shatters the creature's skull with a sickening crunch. Having dispatched the threat, he casually rests atop the dissipating shadows, admitting that while the foe showed some promise, he still possesses an abundance of power to burn through before the day is done. Nearby, the onlookers are struck with disbelief as they realize the caliber of the reinforcements that have arrived, noting that the presence of such high-ranking captains was entirely unexpected. The two leaders exchange brief, informal words. While one complains about the physical toll of the battle, the other dismissively tells him to find his own way back once the task is complete. Far from the immediate fray, a veteran researcher named Jim, known for his mastery over the kingdom's barriers and teleportation magic, prepares to execute his part of the operation with a grim, focused resolve. This intervention had been set in motion nearly an hour prior during a tense meeting of the Council of 12, where the masked captain was dispatched to assess the true nature of the threat. Now, utilizing a specialized magical device to link his vision with an ally's, he monitors the situation through a handwritten note, though his choice of a playful emoji draws a dry critique from his companion. He remains stoic, his masked face betraying nothing as he notes that the captain of the Seraph Wings is far too serious to appreciate Jian's humor. Their conversation shifts to the gravity of the situation, noting that suspicious individuals linked to the incident have been spotted. Turning his attention back to his comrade, he warns that Jian's own crew is currently in peril. Suddenly, a magical projection of a gem flickers into existence, his presence demanding immediate attention as he calls out to the captain. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the skeletal beast recoils in genuine shock, realizing that the arrival of the captains changes everything. It acknowledges that these men operate on a level far beyond even gold-ranked adventurers, its gaze flickering between the fallen Talius and the approaching Jian. The creature's thoughts drift to the defenders it just faced, acknowledging Juna's hidden courage despite her timid nature and Talius's unwavering devotion to his cause. It then looks upon Kinato, noting the boy's absurd kindness and the vast potential hidden within his battered frame. Despite their exhaustion and the toll the battle has taken, the beast can see the sheer desperation in their eyes, a testament to their resolve to protect the town at any cost. As the dark energy swirls around them, the monster's voice rasps with a predatory hunger, questioning if its opponent is truly prepared for what comes next. He responds with a chillingly calm expression, a dark shadow crossing his face as he questions if the beast's focus is truly intended for him alone. Seizing what it perceives as a golden opportunity, the skeletal horror lunges forward with a roar of delight, declaring this its lucky day as it attempts to claim the captain for itself. He watches in stunned silence as the skeletal beast suddenly lunges, not to attack him, but to snatch up its master. The sinister woman, whom the creature calls Noise, calmly suggests it is time for them to return home, her voice devoid of the malice she had displayed moments before. Because of this sudden retreat, a massive shockwave erupts, shaking the very foundations of the town. Jian reels from the force of the blast, his eyes wide with disbelief at the sheer scale of the power unleashed, while the beast carries the woman into the sky, leaving the chaos behind. Moments later, Captain Raid intervenes, his voice booming as he activates a devastating spell called Ex Machina. A torrential downpour of magical blades, his stabbing rain, descends upon the retreating enemies, though they seem prepared for the assault. As the dust begins to settle, the beast and its rider manage to evade the worst of the captain's wrath, slipping through the magical barrage. Jian can only watch, frustrated and breathless, as his primary targets begin to vanish into the distance. In response, he bellows after them, demanding they apologize to the people of the town before they flee like cowards. The skeletal beast merely scoffs at his outburst, noting with a chilling calm that the boy had used the very last of his strength just to make that final leap toward them. Meanwhile, the woman's voice echoes back from the sky, promising that their magic will clash again to determine a true victor. She taunts him, advising that he should spend his time honing his skills until their inevitable reunion. The beast's hollow eyes seem to burn with a dark promise as it adds its own vow to the wind. It speaks of a cycle of mutual destruction, a grim fate where they will continue to tear at one another for as long as it takes to reach an end. Left behind in the wreckage, the young mage collapses to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Despite his exhaustion, his resolve remains unbroken. He whispers a vow to the empty air, promising that no matter how many times they return, he will be there to stop them with his magic. He moved quickly to catch the young boy as his strength finally gave out, the exhaustion of the battle claiming him. Kanado's body swayed before he collapsed into the older man's arms, his hands battered and stained with blood from the intense struggle. Looking down at his unconscious companion with a weary but proud smile, the captain whispered words of praise, telling him he had put up a magnificent fight and done a good job. High above the quieted town, where smoke still drifted from the ruins, they stood together on a rooftop, a moment of hard-won peace following the storm. Kanado rushes home, bursting through the door with excitement to share his news with his grandmother. However, the joyful homecoming is shattered by a horrific vision. A skeletal beast looms over the ruins of his world, coldly declaring that it has annihilated the town and everyone he loves, leaving him as the sole survivor for a final, cruel confrontation. He jolts awake with a terrified cry, the nightmare's grip still tight on his heart. As his eyes snap open, he finds a gentle hand resting on his brow, grounding him back in a reality far removed from the skeletal horror of his dreams. The young boy finds himself confined to a bed, his head and arm heavily bandaged, bearing the physical toll of his recent ordeal. Beside him sits Liney, who looks up from a card with a bright, relieved smile, welcoming him back to the waking world. Confused and disoriented, he questions his surroundings, only for his companion to explain that he was brought to the hospital after tossing and turning in a feverish sweat. He is shocked to learn that 3 full days have passed since he first arrived, a gap in time that leaves him reeling. She proudly declares that she never left his side, nursing him back to health with unwavering dedication. When he questions her unusual, nurse-inspired attire, she strikes a playful pose, insisting it is the perfect costume for someone tasked with restoring another to full health. Her playful demeanor softens into a moment of quiet reflection as she admits that seeing him in such a broken state made her realize the weight of her own influence in pushing him forward. He attempts to apologize for the burden he's caused, but she quickly brushes it off, asserting that caring for him is simply part of her duty. Despite her fears and worries, she feels a profound responsibility to see their journey through to the end. She muses aloud, wondering if he might have found a simpler, happier life had he remained in the safety of the town, continuing his work at the Setai clinic instead of facing such peril. Tears well in her eyes as she finally reveals the true depth of her motivation, her voice trembling with raw emotion. She confesses that the reason she remains by his side, through every danger and nightmare, is simply because the thought of being apart from him is more than she can bear. She listens as Kanado offers a sincere apology for the distress he caused her. Despite his weakened state and the loss of his magical abilities, he promises to remain her protector, his eyes reflecting a quiet resolve. In response to his earnestness, she suddenly lunges forward, playfully yet forcefully grabbing him as she insists she wasn't worried at all. Their lighthearted struggle is interrupted when the door swings open, revealing Jian standing in the threshold. Following closely behind the captain, a composed woman in a nurse's uniform reminds them that they are, in fact, in a medical facility. With a mischievous glint in her eye, she offers to provide a key so they can lock the door if they intend to continue their intimate display, leaving the young man sputtering in embarrassment. The captain watches the chaotic scene with a mix of amusement and surprise, while the young girl remains firmly attached to her patient. Shifting to a more serious tone, he begins to update his friend on the state of the town, explaining that the kingdom has already dispatched a reconstruction team. He reassures the recovering youth that the rest of their companions are safe and resting nearby, expressing deep gratitude for the selfless sacrifice made to protect the townspeople. The nurse, identified as Kureha, offers a blunt yet fond assessment, remarking that seeing him so battered was actually quite unsightly because he had clearly overexerted himself. Hearing that everyone else is unharmed, a wave of relief washes over the bandaged boy. However, that relief is short-lived as she announces it is time for his treatment, summoning a massive, multi-tentacled creature known as Octomia. The room is suddenly filled with the writhing limbs of the beast as she commands her patient to remain still for his medicine. As the boy's terrified screams echo through the halls, the captain casually explains that Kureha is an old acquaintance whose family specializes in a rare, albeit unconventional, form of healing magic. This unique power is a testament to how magic can be either inherited through bloodlines or meticulously shaped through a practitioner's own specialized training. He looks on in surprise as the nurse acknowledges the versatility of his sea-time magic, though she notes its complexity makes it difficult to master. He feels the creature's tentacles brush against his skin, and the gashes begin to seal instantly, a stark contrast to the slow, natural recovery his own techniques usually promote. He listens as she explains that while his methods are akin to moist wound healing, her family's lineage allows them to weave damaged tissues back together at a cellular level. She then shifts her tone to a grave warning, cautioning him that another reckless attempt to push his body beyond its limits will permanently shatter his mana circuits. She concludes the day's treatment by leaving him with a haunting question. Is he truly prepared for a life where he can never help another soul again? She is soon interrupted by the captain, but she merely clicks her tongue in annoyance and dismisses his concern with a cold assurance of her own well-being. They eventually leave him alone in the sudden silence of the infirmary, where the young practitioner stares blankly ahead as the gravity of his situation takes hold. He is suddenly startled by a boisterous laugh in the adjacent bed, where a familiar, energetic youth strikes a dramatic pose and demands he feel honored to be in such heroic company. He sits in a hospital bed as Liney brightly introduces herself, prompting Kinato to explain that they are all the same age. Kureha, observing the interaction, playfully asks if Kinato has found a new companion in his recovery. Despite his usual bravado, the swordsman is visibly flustered, his face flushing a deep red as he offers a curt, awkward greeting to the newcomers. He and the others find the atmosphere thick with mutual embarrassment, leaving the three of them in a state of shared social paralysis. While Liney stands frozen, Zio is internally reeling at the sudden appearance of a girl his age, baffled by how Kinato can remain so composed in her presence. Outside the hospital walls, the capital's landscape remains serene, yet the weight of recent failures hangs heavy in the air. Orders have been issued for the Seraph Wings to bolster security, a necessary measure following the humiliating escape of their enemies, a stain on any hero's reputation. Zio's thoughts drift back to the frantic moments of the battle, convinced that he could have reached the trapped civilians in time. The memory of the falling debris and his own perceived inadequacy fuels a burning sense of duty. He suddenly snaps back to the present, his expression hardening with a renewed sense of purpose. With a defiant look, he reminds Kinato of his identity, questioning why anyone would be surprised by his determination to act. He is interrupted as the door swings open, revealing two familiar faces rushing into the room. Kinato watches in surprise as Talius and Juna arrive, their relief at seeing him awake palpable even from across the ward. He is quickly approached by Juna, who is overcome with emotion as she tearfully apologizes for what happened. While she sobs with relief, Talius stands by her side, his presence a silent testament to the bond they share as comrades. She is overcome with guilt, her voice trembling as she confesses how useless she felt during the recent crisis. She blames her own perceived inadequacy for forcing him into such a dangerous position, her tears a testament to her regret. Beside her, the young man with glasses echoes the sentiment, swearing to grow stronger than anyone so that he can finally be someone to rely on. Kinato, still bandaged and recovering, can only watch them with wide, stunned eyes, moved by their sudden display of resolve. This display of devotion sparks a fire within him. Looking back at the support he's received from the guild and his friends, he realizes he too wants to change, to be more than just a burden to those who have encouraged him so much. He envisions the strength of those he admires, specifically the hero Zio, and understands that to truly protect people, he must find the strength to stand on his own 2 feet and act independently. With a determined gaze, he stares at his palm, declaring his intent to master the art of body boosting. He vows to fight, to win, and to become a true protector who can stand alongside his comrades. However, this heroic declaration is met with immediate exasperation from a nurse. She stares at him in disbelief, wondering if a single word of her previous medical advice actually made it into his head. She doesn't wait for a response, delivering a sharp blow to his head with her clipboard. She berates him for his recklessness, warning that another attempt at magic could permanently shatter his mana circuits and ruin his physical abilities forever. She leans in close, her expression stern as she delivers a harsh truth. He simply isn't built for the front lines of combat. She reminds him that magic is a delicate balance of mind and body, a balance he is currently in no state to maintain. She watches as the captain explains the dire situation to the young practitioner. Jian points out that the boy lacks the precise control needed for physical reinforcement, making his current efforts a dangerous burden. He warns that without this balance, the boy will push himself past his breaking point without even realizing it, leading to self-destruction. Because of this risk, the captain decrees a mandatory hiatus from all missions, insisting that the recovery period be spent in specialized training. As the boy processes this news with a look of concern, a sudden, mischievous spark ignites in the captain's eyes, signaling a plan that is likely as unconventional as it is effective. He reveals his solution, the Meijo clan. These legendary experts in mana manipulation are the ones he has chosen to oversee the boy's development, promising a level of mastery that few can achieve in their lifetime. The announcement is met with a chorus of disbelief and shock from the entire group. They question the captain's sanity, noting that the Meijo are so reclusive that most have never even laid eyes on them, let alone considered them as potential mentors. Undeterred by their skepticism, the captain explains that the women of this clan possess an unparalleled finesse with mana. In his eyes, there is no better environment for a novice to learn the delicate art of internal energy management. He concludes by describing them as the most formidable warriors in existence. Moments later, the boy finds himself standing before the clan, his face pale with dread as the air vibrates with the fierce, rhythmic battle cries of the legendary warriors surrounding him. In certain regions, the very air hums with a dangerous intensity. These designated high-risk zones, such as the territory of the Meijo clan, are places where the concentration of mana reaches volatile levels, warping the environment into something both wondrous and lethal. From the crumbling ruins of the old capital to the treacherous heights of the Dragon's Nest, entry is strictly forbidden to all but the most seasoned adventurers. Yet, even for them, survival is never a certainty, regardless of their rank or the permissions they hold. The young healer gulped, his eyes wide with apprehension as he passed a grim marker, a bleached skull mounted on a spike. The oppressive atmosphere of the high-risk zone was already beginning to weigh on him, making every shadow seem like a lurking threat. He turned to his companion, questioning if it was truly wise to simply show up unannounced. His guide, however, remained unfazed, explaining that the Meijo clan had aided him long ago, and he felt it was time to reconnect with the fierce warriors who lived so close to their current path. As they began their steep ascent, the air grew thin and a massive bird of prey circled overhead. The captain warned that they were now within the Meijo clan's territory, advising the boy to be cautious with his mana. Any reckless use of magic could be mistaken for an act of aggression by the expert mages who guarded these peaks. Despite the warnings, the boy's excitement flared when he spotted a patch of rare sugar grass growing among the rocks. He marveled at the sheer density of mana in the air, which made his entire body tingle with an unfamiliar energy as they climbed higher into the unknown. His journey had been a source of great envy just a few days prior. Back at the guild, a boisterous swordsman had been fuming with frustration, lamenting the fact that his own schedule was packed with missions, preventing him from joining the expedition to see the legendary Meijo clan. While the swordsman fumed, the young healer had been receiving a final checkup from the resident nurse, who carefully wrapped his wounds and warned him not to remove the bandages. His friends gathered to see him off, offering words of encouragement and playful requests for souvenirs. Though he knew the place they were heading was far from a typical tourist destination. He lay in bed, eyes wide with apprehension as his companions, Talius and Juna, huddled under the blankets beside him. They spoke in hushed, fearful tones about the village of the Meijo clan, a place so notorious that even seasoned adventurers hesitated to approach its borders. The young boy could hardly believe he was headed towards such a legendary and dangerous destination. Trembling visibly beneath the sheets, the two warned him of the dire consequences of trespassing on Meijo land. They whispered tales of the clan, snatching up intruders for punishment the moment a foot crossed into their territory. A heavy lump formed in his throat as he processed the gravity of the warnings. Despite their terror, his friends couldn't help but make requests for souvenirs. Juna sheepishly asked for something sweet, while Talius hoped for a practical item he could use daily. He could only offer a skeptical look, doubting that a clan of fierce warriors would have much in the way of gift shops. The memory shifted to a tense exchange with Liney, who had been adamant about joining the expedition. When he firmly refused, citing the extreme danger and his concern for her safety, she had lashed out in frustration. Her sharp words and sudden departure left a lingering sting, though his resolve to keep her out of harm's way remained unshaken. Returning to the present, he chewed on a blade of sugar grass, the sweetness a small comfort amidst the oppressive mana of the high-risk zone. He watched Jian, reflecting on his own weakness and the need to grow stronger, to stop causing Liney worry, and to truly protect those he cared for. He knew he had to endure the trials ahead at the Meijo village. This moment of reflection was shattered when a sudden presence loomed over them from the jagged rock walls. He looked up, his heart hammering against his ribs as he spotted a figure perched high above, watching them with predatory intensity. Before he could even shout a warning, the intruder made their move. The stranger, a warrior of the Meijo clan adorned in their traditional wide-brimmed hat, landed before them with an accusatory glare. She ignored the boy entirely, her focus locking onto Jian as she identified him as a criminal, noting the specific braid and the scar on his face. While Jian stood frozen in confusion at the sudden charge, the warrior declared that he had disrupted the order of her clan and would be dealt with immediately. Without another word, the warrior launched a devastating strike. She moved with a speed that defied the eye, her descent culminating in a thunderous impact that shattered the very ground beneath her. Dust and stone erupted into the air as she brought the full weight of her wrath down upon the spot where they stood. She has forced a sudden shift in their plans. The captain shouts to his young companion, warning him to brace himself as they pivot. Instead of avoiding the Meijo, he decides they must head straight for their village at full speed, much to Kanado's vocal distress as he clings on for dear life. As they race through the sky, a swarm of Meijo warriors on winged mounts pursues them, their war cries echoing through the clouds. The pursuit is relentless, with the warriors closing the gap rapidly and surrounding the fleeing pair. Looking back at the approaching horde, Minato realizes the gravity of their predicament. The sheer number of pursuers makes it clear that escape is no longer an option. They are being herded toward their destination with no room for error. Nestled high among the jagged peaks of a designated high-risk zone lies Sky Dragon, the ancestral village of the Meijo clan. The imposing structures are built directly into the cliffside, overlooking a sheer drop that serves as a natural defense. Upon their arrival, the village erupts in a frenzy of hostility. The sight of a man in their sacred domain is an affront, and the Meijo quickly identify Jian as a known criminal, their voices rising in sharp accusation. A mob of armed warriors surrounds the pair, their weapons drawn and their intentions clear. They clamor for justice, demanding that the intruders be punished and purged from their home immediately. Despite the initial hostility, they find themselves granted an audience within the village's central hall. Jian offers a humble apology for their unannounced intrusion, while a village representative explains that the community is particularly tense as they prepare for the upcoming Lunar Fighting Festival. Two formidable figures step forward: Latna, the boisterous captain of the West Guard, and Kiryu, the stoic captain of the East Guard. While Latna finds the timing of their arrival hilariously poor, Kiryu remains focused on the fact that their chief is already on edge, especially since Jian has come seeking Meijo techniques for the boy. Jian is dismissed with a lethal warning, yet he only scoffs, asserting that retreat is out of the question. Despite his audacity, the Meijo warriors only find amusement in his defiance, mocking him as a common criminal. An elder among them explains that their mana manipulation is a subconscious legacy of pride, a sacred skill they would never deign to teach to an outsider. The elder's disdain deepens as she recounts how Jian, whom she calls the monkey, arrived decades ago uninvited. She describes him as a lazy intruder who did nothing but eat and sleep, only surviving because the clan chief showed him uncharacteristic mercy. Latna joins in a mockery, noting that their clan has a long, dark history with selfish men who believe they can do as they please. Minato watches the exchange, his initial optimism quickly being replaced by a cold sense of dread. The weight of their hostility finally sinks in for the young practitioner. He had truly believed they would be welcomed with open arms, but the reality of their situation is far more precarious than he imagined. Latna makes it clear that while they have no intention of surrendering Jian, Minato is free to leave and return home. Sensing a desperate need to change the mood, he tentatively speaks up, asking if he might pose a personal question to the other captain. He turns his attention to Kiryu, catching her off guard with a question about her physical health rather than a plea for mercy. He asks if she has been suffering from chronic stiffness in her shoulders or her lower back. The surrounding warriors erupt in laughter at the suggestion that their captain is anything less than perfect, but Minato remains serious. He explains that by pushing both her mana and her body to their absolute limits, she has likely caused her pelvis to fall slightly out of alignment. He shrinks back as a wave of mocking laughter erupts from the Meijo warriors. They scoff at his offer, questioning how a mere man could possibly understand the intricacies of mana, which they have honed into a lethal weapon over generations. Looming over him, the captain narrows her eyes, her gaze sharp behind her mask. She finds his audacity intriguing and, with a chilling edge to her voice, dares him to prove his claims and attempt the treatment. Accepting the challenge, he steels his resolve while she issues a final, grim warning. If his attempt yields no results, she will answer his failure with the full force of her fists. She boasts of the Meijo's untouched mana purity before he finally lunges forward, invoking his sea-time magic to begin the pelvic realignment. The impact of his technique is immediate, forcing a sharp, undignified cry from the captain as he applies precise pressure to her hips. The suddenness of the adjustment catches her completely off guard, her body tensing under the unexpected sensation. Moments later, she stands in stunned silence, a look of utter bewilderment crossing her face as she realizes the heavy burden in her limbs has vanished. Her body feels impossibly light, a transformation so profound that even her fellow warriors can only watch in speechless disbelief as the young practitioner completes his work. She stood in stunned silence, her limbs feeling unnaturally light as the boy's magic flowed through her. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever experienced, leaving her to wonder about the true nature of the power he wielded. He looked up at her with an earnest expression, eager to know if the treatment had been effective. With a gentle gesture, he offered to make further adjustments if any discomfort remained, his focus entirely on his patient's well-being. She remained motionless, her face partially obscured by her mask as a cold sweat broke out across her brow. Despite the visible physical reaction, she flatly denied that the magic had any effect on her whatsoever. He recoiled in shock, his face contorting into a mask of pure desperation at the thought of his failure. Bowing frantically, he pleaded for another opportunity to prove his skills, while she could only stare back in a mix of confusion and growing irritation. He refused to give up, his eyes narrowing with a sudden, intense determination as he promised to root out whatever ailment was still bothering her. His hands moved toward her again, ignoring her startled protests as he prepared to double his efforts. With a sudden burst of speed, he unleashed a flurry of precise movements, his hands becoming a blur as he worked on her pressure points. A sharp cry of surprise escaped her lips as the intensity of the treatment caught her completely off guard. They watched from the sidelines, their expressions shifting from curiosity to utter bewilderment as strange sounds and frantic movements erupted from the center of the room. The stoic warriors of the Meijo clan could hardly believe what they were witnessing. The misunderstanding reached a breaking point as the clan members interpreted the chaotic scene as a direct assault on their captain. They drew their weapons and called for immediate punishment, leaving the young practitioner trembling in fear as he realized the grave danger he had inadvertently caused. He is suddenly shielded as a massive, imposing figure draped in a thick white fur cloak and wearing a deer skull mask commands the room to be still. With a single, powerful burst of energy, the figure sends the aggressive Meijo warriors flying backward, ending the confrontation instantly. She stands as an immovable wall between the boys and the clan's wrath, leaving everyone stunned by the sudden display of power. The air still hums from the force of the intervention, silencing even the fiercest warriors. The figure is revealed to be the village chief, a realization that leaves the young healer in awe of her sheer strength. He marvels at how she effortlessly repelled the entire Meijo force in the blink of an eye, recognizing a level of power far beyond anything he has witnessed. Turning her attention to the captain of the East Guard, the chief inquires about the nature and quality of the boy's magic. Karyu, usually so composed, can only offer a stammering, hesitant response under the weight of the chief's gaze. She attempts to dismiss the treatment as unremarkable, claiming her body felt fine even before the boy intervened. However, her facade is quickly shattered when her peer, Latna, loudly reminds her of how much she had been complaining about her aching muscles just the other day in the bath, causing the chief to emit a low, ominous rumble of disapproval. She makes a sudden and startling decree. She will be taking both the boy and his companion into her personal custody. The announcement hangs heavy in the air, catching everyone off guard. The surrounding warriors and captains are visibly shaken by the decision, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. The idea of the chief taking such a direct interest in these outsiders is unprecedented. Despite the captain's attempt to protest, the chief remains firm, offering a polite but final refusal to reconsider. Meanwhile, the two captives can only watch in growing dread, their imaginations running wild with terrifying possibilities of what custody under such a formidable figure might actually entail. He and his companion watched as a new figure stepped forward, her voice sharp with dissent as Suzu, the captain of the North Guard, declared that the Meijo could not afford to be tolerant of outsiders who had trespassed into their sacred territory. She continued her protest, arguing that the chief's leniency would damage their collective pride and that one of the captives was a known criminal who deserved punishment. But the other captains immediately closed ranks, reminding her that they followed the chief's orders without question. They faced off as the air crackled with hostility, with Latna baring her teeth and threatening to forcibly silence Suzaku if she dared to defy their leader's will. Their bickering was cut short as the village chief spoke, her voice echoing from behind the deer skull mask as she revealed that a member of the Council of 12 had personally requested a favor regarding the boys. She turned her gaze toward the dissenting captain, pointedly asking if being discourteous to a guest of such high standing wouldn't be the very thing that truly wounded their Meijo pride. They began their descent, moving deep into the heart of the village through a series of ancient, stone-carved stairwells. They reached a heavy wooden door where the chief offered a surprising apology for the barbaric treatment they had received, explaining that her warriors were merely overzealous in protecting their dignity. She informed them that this would be their cell for the time being, while Latna lingered behind to deliver a final, menacing warning that any misstep would be met with swift retribution. She leaves the two captives to settle into their new reality, though the accommodations are far from what they expected. Kinato sniffs the air, his stomach already mourning the loss of decent meals, while Jian laments their situation. Kinato can't shake a nagging sense of familiarity, a feeling that they have been in this exact kind of trouble before. They follow their silent guide deeper into the mountain, eventually emerging into a cavernous hall where the walls are lined with thousands of books, illuminated by the warm glow of lanterns. She stops abruptly, her bare feet clicking against the cold stone as she clarifies their position. While they remain prisoners, she explains that this library is her personal study and the only source of entertainment in this secluded village, granting them permission to stay among the scrolls and tomes. She then sheds the heavy white fur and the imposing deer mask, revealing herself to be a young girl with short, dark hair and a steady, authoritative gaze. She introduces herself as Terasu, the chief of the Meijo clan, and commands them to show proper respect. She stands before them, much smaller than her previous attire suggested, leaving the two companions utterly speechless. Hinata is particularly struck by the fact that the formidable leader of the fierce Meijo warriors is a girl no taller than himself. They watch as the guards behind her lose their professional composure, whispering about how adorable their young chief is. Terasu ignores the fawning and extends her hand toward Kinato, demanding that he demonstrate the unique magic he had used before. She watches with intense curiosity as he gently takes her hand and begins his work. A soft, rhythmic pulse of energy emanates from his palms, flowing into her as he applies his Setai techniques to her arm. He finishes the treatment, and Terasu offers her analysis of his power. She notes that while the Meijo focus entirely on mastering their own internal mana, his magic is fundamentally different. It is a force designed entirely to be used for the sake of others. She questions the young boy on his ultimate goal, wondering what knowledge he seeks from a Meijo. Kinato admits his confusion, but expresses a desire to learn how to enhance his physical capabilities through magic. He continues, his voice steady as he explains that he never wants to feel the sting of regret for possessing such a gift. The chief counters, questioning why he would intentionally place himself in harm's way when his magic is clearly designed to aid others rather than himself in combat. Looking away, he confesses that he isn't ready to abandon the untapped potential within him. While he acknowledges that serving others is a noble path, he feels there is more he must discover. He vows to continue his struggle for as long as necessary. When the chief asks if he would persist, even if his efforts proved entirely futile, his answer is a simple, unwavering affirmation. His gaze hardens with a newfound resolve as he declares his true purpose: to protect his home and the people who inhabit it. This singular drive is what led him to seek out the Meijo in the first place. A moment of silence passes before she observes that his motivations mirror her own. She recognizes the deep-seated need to safeguard one's sanctuary and those within it. He is overcome with gratitude, bowing deeply as he thanks her for the opportunity. Nearby, his companion shares in the joy of this hard-won approval. He listens as the chief sets a strict deadline: 1 month to master the art of magical physical enhancement. While the fiery Captain Latina voices her sharp disapproval of training outsiders, the chief remains firm, noting that his unique healing abilities are a resource the Meijo, who can only manipulate their own internal mana, cannot afford to ignore. The ultimatum is then delivered with chilling clarity. Failure means he will be bound to the village for the rest of his days, serving as a perpetual source of healing for the clan. The weight of this sentence leaves him wide-eyed and speechless. As the chief departs, her mind drifts to the internal friction within the village and the potential move by the militant faction led by Suzu, though she secretly hopes these newcomers might revitalize their isolated home. Outside, the reality of his situation begins to sink in, and he trembles at the thought of a life in captivity, even as his companion urges him to maintain his resolve. Meanwhile, the imposing leader finds herself alone, her composure finally shattering as a deep flush creeps across her face. She clutches her cheeks in a daze, overwhelmed by the sudden realization that this encounter marked the very first time she had ever spoken to a man. Back in the training grounds, the young healer collapses under the pressure, earning a harsh rebuke from the unimpressed captain. It was a day of firsts, leaving the chief with a racing heart and the boy with a daunting mountain to climb. Kinato stands before the three captains, his face full of determination as they prepare to begin his training. They inform him that under direct orders from Lady Terasu, his instruction starts today, and he bows respectfully, eager to prove his worth. He watches in disbelief as Latina effortlessly hoists a massive boulder over her head, demonstrating the raw power required for their arts. She explains that building muscle is the essential first step, bluntly instructing him to find a similar rock and follow her lead. She simply replies that it is her own natural strength when he asks, stunned, if she's using some kind of physical enhancement magic. The realization that this is a baseline requirement leaves him wondering if the first hurdle is already far beyond his capabilities. He listens as she continues her explanation, noting that for the Meijo, mana manipulation is as natural as breathing and entirely intuitive. This lack of logic or formal technique only deepens his confusion, as he struggles to grasp how one is supposed to learn something that cannot be explained. She watches as he focuses intensely, trying to sharpen his senses and accelerate his internal energy to match their rhythm. The effort is so great that his power surges uncontrollably, resulting in a sudden, violent burst that shreds his clothes and leaves him standing in tatters. He stands overwhelmed in the aftermath of the accidental discharge, leaving Suzaku wide-eyed with shock at the sheer absurdity of the situation. She can hardly believe that his first attempt at mana control resulted in him literally making his own garments explode. She sits alone later that evening, recording the day's events in her journal and reflecting on the strange young man. While his magic initially seemed weak and clumsy, she finds herself unable to forget the profound sense of peace and relaxation his spell provided her earlier. She contemplates the month-long agreement they have established, a faint smile touching her lips as she considers the possibilities. If their village could somehow harness and integrate the unique power of his magic, it would provide them with a strategic advantage unlike any they have ever known. She approaches the village chief, questioning her presence in the training grounds. Terasu, appearing without her usual deer skull mask, giggles mischievously and remarks that she has a brilliant plan in motion, clearly pleased with the secret scheme she has devised for the young practitioner. High above on a rocky outcrop, the chief watches as the boy continues his grueling training. By the 6th day, despite being physically spent and run down, his spirit remains remarkably unbroken. Latna barks orders, demanding he improve his abysmal stamina if he hopes to survive the trials ahead. He gasps for breath, offering a weak apology while struggling to stay upright, while Sazako watches from the sidelines, struck by the boy's sheer tenacity and refusal to give up. He pushes himself forward, scrambling up the treacherous terrain with renewed determination. He acknowledges his own weakness, knowing that only through this relentless effort can he gain the strength necessary to fight alongside the Majo. Suddenly, his footing gives way, and he tumbles backward into the abyss with a startled cry. Terasu watches the descent with a mix of curiosity and concern, wondering if he can survive such a drop, while he desperately tries to manifest his magic in midair, only to find the power eludes him in his panic. Before he can strike the ground, the chief intervenes, manifesting a shimmering sphere of energy that cushions his fall. Latna watches in shock as the boy is gently lowered to safety, surprised by the sudden and precise display of power. Latna applauds the display of agility, impressed by the chief's swift reaction to the accident. Terasu, however, remains focused on the boy, admitting that while his struggles are entertaining to watch, she has no desire to see him broken beyond repair and would rather see him continue his training. As he pulls himself in the water, shivering and gasping, he offers his sincere gratitude for the rescue. She simply turns away with a cool indifference, reminding him that he is now deeply in her debt for saving his life and that she expects him to make up for it. Her assistant is frantically recording the day's events, her face flushed with a mix of duty and unexpected excitement. Having assisted in the rescue, she marvels at the physical sensation of a man's body, noting its surprising firmness as she scribbles into the official records mandated by the chief. Beyond the scribe's desk, the Majo village clings to the rugged mountainside, a serene collection of traditional structures nestled among the peaks and waterfalls. Within this mountain sanctuary, the young practitioner trudges toward the communal baths, his body a map of aches and exhaustion. He sneezes violently, his spirit dampened by a sense of inadequacy after the day's brutal trials, dreading the soreness that will surely greet him in the morning. As he nears the steaming waters, he is intercepted by the boisterous captain of the West Guard. She stands tall and imposing, her muscular frame barely contained by her simple wraps, and casually suggests they share the bath, a proposal that sends him into a stuttering panic. Ignoring his protests, the warrior woman discards her top with a fluid motion, revealing a torso hardened by years of combat and training. The sight leaves both the boy and the nearby scribe paralyzed with shock, though the captain merely scoffs at the perceived shyness of men. Eventually, the heat of the spring begins to soak into their tired limbs as they settle into the water. While the boy keeps a respectful distance, the captain evaluates his progress, acknowledging his fierce determination while bluntly stating that his current lack of physical strength makes him a liability. She rises from the water with a casual disregard for modesty that further mortifies her young charge. Despite his frantic pleas for her to cover herself, she remains unfazed, signaling that his rest is over and the next phase of his ordeal is about to begin. Her assistant approaches, explaining that she regularly helps loosen the captain's hardened muscles after training and intends to provide the same service to him. He can only watch in mounting apprehension, asking with a nervous gulp what she plans to do as his exhaustion wars with the sheer intensity of the Majo women's presence. She watches intently as the young practitioner applies his sea-time magic to the captain's massive frame, his hands moving with a rhythmic series of smacks and rubs designed to increase her flexibility. He finishes the treatment, leaving the warrior feeling a surge of relief as her body cracks and pops, the deep-seated tension finally melting away under his touch. She is so energized by the experience that she declares her intent to run another lap immediately, leaving the boy completely baffled as to why she would choose more exercise over a relaxing bath. She leaves a trail of dust in her wake as the young leader turns her attention to him, requesting that he perform the same magic on her as a way to repay the debt of their meeting. She feels his hands move to her shoulders as he begins the treatment, taking the opportunity to question him about his unique gaze and whether the strange light in his eyes is a trait he has possessed since birth. He explains that while he can perceive the flow of mana and identify physical abnormalities in others, his power is limited by the fact that he cannot apply it to himself or use it for his own physical enhancement, which means his training often results in nothing but pain. He watches as she listens quietly, the weight of her heritage pressing down on her as she reflects on the rigid nature of their world and the unchanging traditions she was born to protect as the village chief, noting that change does not always equate to progress. She is met with a warm smile as he offers a gentle word of encouragement, suggesting that even if change seems impossible, the simple act of trying to better oneself is a pursuit worth undertaking, regardless of the final outcome. He is startled as the young woman, now without her imposing mask, approaches him with a soft expression. She commends his previous words, her gaze lingering on him with newfound respect as she acknowledges the truth in what he said. Because of his insight, she offers him a reward, though he remains confused as to what he could have possibly earned. She instructs him to place his palm against hers, a simple gesture that feels heavy with significance under the moonlight. Moments later, she begins a rhythmic series of movements, commanding him to block her strikes and counter her kicks. He struggles to keep pace with a sudden shift from conversation to combat. As they move through the water, she explains that this ritual is called Manga, a sacred dance the Meijo practiced from childhood. He can feel her potent mana surging into his own body, unnaturally heightening his physical strength and senses. The intensity of the dance increases, and a sharp blow sends him reeling as she warns that mastering such a technique in a single month is an impossible feat despite the pain. She urges him to focus on refining his control over the energy flowing between them. In the heat of the exchange, he accidentally lunges forward and pins her against the water's surface, his face inches from hers. While he is consumed by the thrill of the discovery and the need to master the technique, she is left breathless and visibly shaken by the sudden intimacy. In response, she violently shoves him away, her face flushing a deep crimson as she berates him for his lack of boundaries. As he splashes into the water, she reminds herself that one must always remain guarded when dealing with the unpredictable nature of men. The Manga is more than just a dance. It is a sacred tradition of the Meijo, a complex ritual where two practitioners must synchronize their mana flows into a single, unified force. By harmonizing their internal energies, the process amplifies their power, culminating in a performance that is as beautiful as it is deadly. Within the training grounds, the young boy and the captain of the West Guard struggle to maintain this delicate balance, as the technique demands absolute, instantaneous control over their mana. As the rhythm intensifies, the energy between them grows faster and more volatile, testing the limits of their concentration. He focuses intensely on his breathing, trying to match her rhythm while calculating the precise points where her strikes will land. He realizes that the most critical aspect of martial arts is controlling the mana used. If either of them falters in their synchronization, the resulting impact will be enough to send him flying. Suddenly, the unstable mana erupts, the force of the failed synchronization sending him tumbling backward as his body is racked with the sudden, agonizing strain of the magical discharge. Gasping for air and clutching his chest, he is told to take a short break as the accumulated pain of the technique hits him all at once. Seeing his exhaustion, she offers him a meringue, a traditional Meijo remedy that resembles a large, wobbling orb of jelly, promising it will restore his flagging strength and mana reserves. Though the truth of its effectiveness is whispered to be uncertain, the Meijo swear by its ability to rejuvenate a weary warrior. Despite the foul taste that makes them both grimace, they consume the medicinal treats, the potent ingredients immediately beginning to circulate through their systems. She notes that while the flavor is disgusting enough to make one pass out, the restorative effects are undeniable and already starting to take hold. The effect is nearly instantaneous, as his heart begins to race with a newfound, manic energy, his fatigue replaced by a surge of power that leaves him eager to resume the grueling training. He declares himself better than ever, his body vibrating with the sheer intensity of the remedy's magical boost. As the scribe watches the boy's sudden outburst of vigor with a silent, wide-eyed stare, the captain merely shrugs, noting that such a hyperactive reaction is simply the price of the meringue's potent restoration. In the background, the boy is already back at work, his movements a blur of hyper-energized motion. He remains confined within the small, portable prison, yet his presence continues to draw the attention of those around him. The young Meijo woman with the twin markings on her brow approaches his bars, her expression clouded with a peculiar uncertainty as she questions if the other captive, Jian, feels any concern for the boy. Jian, lounging with characteristic nonchalance in his own cage, dismisses the worry, claiming his current accommodations are surprisingly comfortable. The woman turns her gaze back to the boy, admitting that while men rarely pique the interest of her village, his unique magical aptitude makes him an asset she cannot simply ignore. He is the subject of her confession as she describes a strange sensation that has begun to plague her, noting how her chest tightens with a dull ache whenever his image crosses her mind. It is a feeling she cannot quite categorize, leaving her visibly flustered as she struggles to understand the root of this sudden physical reaction. She observes his reaction of pure, unadulterated shock, his face contorting as he processes the weight of her admission. He is later joined by her in a quiet archive, where she explains that her search for answers in the ancient texts has yielded nothing regarding these mysterious symptoms. She speaks of the burden of her position, expressing a fear that revealing such a vulnerability to her tribe would be unwise, leaving her with no choice but to seek counsel in secret. She is met with a sudden, intense gravity as he leans forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper while he instructs her to keep these symptoms a strict secret from everyone else. He demands her full cooperation, insisting that she must describe every sensation the very moment it occurs so that he might properly diagnose the cause. He watches her nod in earnest agreement, her face flushed with a naive trust, while a dark, predatory smirk flickers across his features as he silently relishes the ease with which he is capturing her devotion. She vows to keep this bond exclusive, unaware of the manipulative intent behind his helpful facade. She returns to the reality of their confinement, leaning in close to the bars once more, her cheeks burning as she reveals that he even manifested within her dreams the previous night. She reveals a truth that proves to be too much for him, and he recoils to the back of his cage, trembling as he struggles to withstand the overwhelming, innocent intensity of her burgeoning affection. While he remained in his cage, the village around him hummed with anticipation. With only 2 weeks left until the Lunar Fighting Festival, he was not the only one adjusting. As she watched the other outsiders play, noting with a clunk of a game piece that they had adapted remarkably well to the village's rhythm, she continued her thought, suggesting that Lady Terasu might soon turn her gaze outward, perhaps bringing back new, progressive ideas to their secluded home, a change that would be quite incredible for a man settling in Skydragon. Her gaze sharpened as she explained that while some might still resent the men's presence, the true Meijo spirit was not to shun what they disliked, but to confront it with pure, unadulterated violence, even if that wasn't the current spirit of the village. Later, standing before the village shrine with Latna, she reaffirmed that the upcoming decennial festival would be the place where they must prove their worth through strength. While she spoke of strength, he sat alone, grappling with the harsh reality that he simply wasn't built for the boosting technique, realizing that despite understanding the logic, he lacked the necessary mana control. He looked down in shame, recalling how reckless he had been in his earlier attempts to force his mana beyond its limits. He realized he had been trying to accelerate his mana flow through a body that wasn't prepared, essentially burning himself out before he even began, a lesson that could only be truly learned through experience. He concentrates intensely, visualizing the intricate flow of mana required for each precise movement of the dance. He reminds himself that the energy must be focused at every point, acknowledging the subtle shifts in power that accompany each step. He is suddenly jolted out of his concentration by a sharp shout from behind, causing him to jump in surprise. Terasu stands there, having successfully broken his focus with a playful but loud greeting. She approaches him with a knowing smile, commenting on the difficulty of his day, but offering a word of encouragement. She observes that while his mana capacity is still modest, it has undeniably grown, crediting the bitter but effective Moringan medicine for the progress. He resplends with newfound determination, thanking her and the other Meijo for the opportunity to train. He vows to see the process through to the very end, a promise that leaves Teresa momentarily speechless as she processes his earnestness. She notices his resolve and offers to provide immediate pointers on the Macaringe technique to help him refine his skills. He politely declines the offer, explaining that he has already begun to synchronize his efforts with Latna and Karyu. He insists he doesn't want to be a burden to her, a rejection that leaves Terasu visibly stunned and perhaps a bit insulted. She feels a flash of irritation and demands he speak his mind quickly rather than hesitating. He sheepishly admits he has a concern he's been harboring, hoping she might listen to his predicament. They walk together along the wooden walkway as he confesses that while he has managed to grasp the mechanics of the physical boost, his mana remains stubbornly unstable. He seeks her guidance on why his internal energy refuses to settle, even as he masters the physical form. The young practitioner expresses his deep frustration to the masked village chief, lamenting how something that should be natural feels so impossibly difficult to grasp. Terasu counters, suggesting that if he could simply manage his mana with the same instinctive ease as his sea-time magic, the struggle would vanish. While he finds support magic comes to him without effort, the intricacies of physical boosting techniques remain a stubborn hurdle, a sentiment apparently shared by others in the guard. Reflecting on his progress, he realizes he has been blindly forcing the energy rather than letting it flow. He envisions a new approach. Instead of a constant drain, he will focus on striking at precise moments, layering his support magic onto each movement with perfect timing. With this newfound clarity, he turns his attention back to the formidable woman before him. Standing on the wooden walkway, he boldly asks if she would be willing to spar with him, seeking to test his theory in live combat. He is dismissed as a fool, but the chief doesn't hesitate to strike, her movement a blur as she launches a powerful kick. He braces himself, focusing entirely on the physical boost and the precise application of his sea-time magic to anchor his defense. To her genuine surprise, he successfully blocks the heavy blow, explaining that he utilized the Macarenge technique to withstand the impact. However, his triumph is short-lived. She immediately closes the distance. Wrapping him in a crushing embrace, she calls a hug that leaves him gasping about his breaking bones. Despite the painful lesson, she admits her genuine shock that he managed to stop her initial assault. Kinato and Terasu are engaged in a spirited training session, their movements fluid as they practice the Meijo's combat techniques. Terasu, appearing in her youthful form without her customary mask, encourages the boy, praising his progress as they spar under the open sky. Following their exertion, she reflects on the complex history of her people, explaining the ideological rift between her mother and grandmother. While her grandmother favored isolation and a display of raw power, her mother believed in the importance of understanding and embracing the world beyond their borders. He stands outside a traditional bathhouse, shirtless and still catching his breath from the morning's rigorous training. When he notices Terrace nearby, he offers a polite, if slightly bashful, morning greeting. She, however, seems suddenly overwhelmed by the proximity, her face flushing as she realizes the implications of their physical contact. With a frantic energy, she reminds him that only 2 days remain in his month-long trial before hurrying away to the baths. Later, as they soak in the warm waters, the conversation turns back to his remarkable transformation. Terrace notes that not only has his physique improved, but he has shown far more grit and determination than she initially expected when he first arrived a month ago. They sit in the quiet steam, and she extends an invitation to the Lunar Fighting Festival taking place that evening. He finds himself flustered by the intimacy of the moment, struggling to maintain his composure while acknowledging that he still has much to learn regarding their physical boost techniques. She looks away, her expression softening as she speaks of her mother, the former chief, whose legacy of tolerance she strives to uphold. She admits that the past month spent in his company has been a stimulating experience, a sentiment that leaves him momentarily speechless. The weight of her lineage hangs heavy as she details the fundamental disagreement that shaped her upbringing. Her mother's desire for global connection stood in stark contrast to her grandmother's insistence on Meijo supremacy, a conflict that Terasu now carries as the current leader of her clan. She spoke softly, her voice carrying a hint of melancholy as she admitted that the ties between them would likely fade once they parted. Looking down at the water, she confessed her growing realization that she lacked the strength and spirit of her mother, the previous chief. He wouldn't hear of it, his eyes shining with a sudden, fierce resolve. With a bright smile, he countered her doubts, insisting that their connection would never disappear because he simply wouldn't allow it to happen. She watched him, stunned by his conviction, as he explained that the time spent together and the memories shared become an indelible part of a person's soul. He compared this bond to the very feeling she still held for her mother, suggesting that distance could not erase what was already etched into their hearts. They sat in the quiet warmth of the spring, the only sound the distant cry of birds flying across the twilight sky. He reaffirmed his belief that no matter how far apart they might find themselves, a thread of connection would always remain between them. She felt her face flush a deep crimson, her heart racing as his words took on a much heavier meaning in her mind. To her, a vow of eternal connection was synonymous with marriage, a sacred promise to risk one's life for another, and she was suddenly overwhelmed by the thought that he had just proposed. She remained frozen, her eyes wide and her breath hitching as she replayed his words over and over. The concepts of being connected regardless of distance and a vow of love swirled in her head, leaving her completely flustered and unable to speak. She suddenly plunged beneath the surface of the water with a loud splash, unable to handle the intensity of her own embarrassment. He jumped back in surprise, calling out to her in confusion while trying to steer the conversation back to the upcoming Lunar Fighting Festival. High above the village, the moon's halo began to form a rare double ring, an event that occurred only once every decade. This celestial phenomenon bathed the Meijo lands in an ethereal glow, signaling the start of an age-old tradition that would soon sweep the entire community up in its excitement. The festival begins with a symbolic strike, a hammer meeting metal to signal the start of a tradition where the Meijo display their pride and test the full measure of their power. A warrior immediately takes a brutal blow to the face as the drums of the Lunar Fighting Festival thunder, the crowd's roar matching the intensity of the strike. She doesn't falter, spitting blood and bracing herself against the momentum as she slides across the arena floor. With a roar, she retaliates, her fist connecting with bone-shattering force amidst the festive lanterns and the rhythmic beat of the drums. The air crackles with the intensity of the combatants as the bloodthirsty crowd screams for broken bones and total domination, urging the warriors to show no mercy. These brutal exchanges are more than just sport. They're the crucible in which the Meijo forge their techniques and push one another to the absolute limit through relentless sparring. Amidst the fervor, a vibrant moderator named Rekka takes the stage, her voice cutting through the din to announce the start of the festival's main event, the Meijo Hunt. Kinato and Zio watch from the sidelines, their expressions turning to shock at the mention of the hunt. They stand amidst the throng as the announcement echoes through the village, declaring that the entire region will become a battlefield under the eerie glow of the double lunar halos. Kinato can only repeat the name of the event in disbelief, wondering what this Meijo Hunt truly entails. He listens as the rules are broadcast across the floating islands. The first to incapacitate 20 opponents wins. It is a brutal celebration where every tactic is permitted, provided no life is extinguished. Beside him, Zio's eyes sparkle with anticipation at the prospect of such a challenge, while the boy himself can only sweat at the thought of the impending violence. The moderator's cheerful tone contrasts sharply with the gravity of the decree that anything besides killing is fair game. The stakes rise further as the announcement reveals that the district captains are also targets. Defeating one could even lead to taking their position. Suzaku and the other leaders stand ready, their presence a daunting obstacle for any participant. A wave of shock ripples through the crowd when it is revealed that Lady Terasu herself will be joining the fray. The young chief, now without her imposing mask, looks on with a determined yet strangely soft expression. She addresses the gathered Meijo, explaining that her participation is a way to settle the grievances and unease that have plagued the village recently. As her voice carries over the wind, the boy finds himself suddenly propelled into the center of the storm. To the astonishment of everyone, she declares that the criminal Jin will be allowed to fight, but her next words are the true bombshell. She names Kinato as her sworn partner and demands his participation. This revelation sends the spectators into a frenzy of confusion and jealousy, with many questioning if the two are in a secret relationship. The captains and Zio alike are left gaping at the sheer audacity of the clan. Looking directly at him with a deep, unmistakable blush, she warns that she will be very disappointed if he doesn't win. She frames the hunt as the ultimate test of his training and his worthiness as her future companion. He stands frozen, the weight of the chief's words finally sinking in as the surrounding Meijo warriors whisper in shock. They quickly deduce that being named a companion implies a Mateo pair, a lifelong bond. The realization leaves him wide-eyed and trembling, his mind racing to process the sudden, public commitment. This revelation ignites a firestorm of jealousy and rage among the onlookers. Latna, her face contorted with fury, bellows a death threat, convinced that the outsider has somehow bewitched their beloved leader. The crowd's adoration for Terasu instantly curdles into a collective desire for vengeance against the man they believe has seduced her. Amidst the growing hostility, the festival moderator seizes the moment to escalate the stakes, declaring a special rule for the hunt. Both the criminal Jin and the newly minted sworn partner are now worth 10 points each, making them the primary targets of every participant. Jin, far from concerned, merely chuckles at his companion's sudden rise in notoriety. He desperately tries to plead his innocence, shouting that there has been a massive misunderstanding, but his voice is drowned out by the bloodthirsty cries of the warriors. To them, his crime is unforgivable, and the traditional Meijo hunt has effectively transformed into a relentless pursuit of a single man. Before another word can be exchanged, the ground erupts in a violent display of power as the first wave of attackers lunges forward. The air crackles with the intensity of their combined mana, forcing the young practitioner to react instinctively to the lethal surge of energy closing in from all sides. With a sharp intake of breath, he activates a Setai boost, his body becoming a blur of motion as he narrowly evades the initial strike. Though his primary goal is to survive the onslaught and clear his name, he realizes that for now, his only option is to run.